My name's Anne. I got married 6 months ago when I was 26. My husband John is 30 and works in an office. So this story is about when John decided without asking me to let his younger sister, Molly, stay with us in our new house. We spent $45,000 on this house for just the two of us. We've been planning the house and furniture since we got engaged. When John's stuff arrived, there was so much of it. I was surprised and asked if it would all fit in his space. Then John casually dropped the bomb that Molly was moving in too. I was shocked. Why? I asked. We just got married. But John didn't see the problem. He said Molly's family too, so it's fine. She said she wanted to live in the new house. I objected without any discussion, but John just kept unpacking, ignoring me. Then he suddenly got angry, yelling, "If you don't like it, you can leave. I've already decided Molly's staying, so stop complaining." I wasn't convinced and threatened to call my brother. Scared of my brother's reaction, John changed his mind quickly. "Wait, don't call him. Molly won't stay long. She just needs a place until she finds a job and a house. Can you understand?" I reluctantly agreed. Then I suggested, "Can Molly stay in the guest room?" John hesitated and said, Yeah," though he didn't seem sure. I moved Molly's things into the guest room. After a busy day of unpacking, we were almost done. We were having a toast to celebrate when the doorbell rang. It was late, so I wanted to ignore it, but John answered it quickly. I was surprised because I was ready for bed. John called me, "And Molly's here." Irritated, I came back to the living room. "Welcome, Molly. Why are you here so late?" I asked, trying to hide my annoyance. Molly replied, "Can't I come whenever I want?" "Now show me my room, big bro," she said, and John led her to the guest room. Soon Molly complained, "This isn't it." John said, "It's a bigger room, isn't that better?" She searched for another room, saying, "Upstairs, right? This is my room, big bro." I felt uneasy, and when I went upstairs, Molly was claiming my workroom as hers. I couldn't help but raise my voice. "This is my workroom, so it can't be your room," I insisted. John suggested, "Why not? Let's make this Molly's room," but I kept saying no. Then I pointed to the room next to it, intended to be John's hobby room, but he panicked. "Not that room. I've been looking forward to using it. I chose the wallpaper and everything." "No way," I replied. The only option left was the featured children's room, currently a guest room. Molly, still unhappy, snapped, "And you're quite insolent, aren't you? Not listening to the head of the household. Quite cheeky for a freeloader who depends on him for meals." I was too tired to argue back, thinking, who's the real freeloader here? As I headed back to the living room, I heard Molly asking, "Hey, big bro, do we have anything to eat?" "I'm hungry." I ignored her and continued celebrating alone in the living room. They were arguing, but I didn't pay much attention until John came over and accused me, saying, "You're always going against me and acting all high and mighty." He grabbed the wine bottle and drank it all, shouting, "If you won't listen to me, then leave. I'm the head of this household, don't underestimate me." Then he left with Molly. Despite the late hour, I decided to call my brother and tell him about Molly. He answered right away, sounding angry. I asked if he was mad and interrupted him during an argument with his wife. He'd apologized, but it seemed their relationship was in trouble. Worried, I offered to come over, but he wanted to be alone. I told him about Molly moving in and the issues with John and her. He was concerned about how I was being treated, but I brushed it off, saying I wouldn't be anyone's servant. We then talked about his problems with his wife, and I was shocked to learn she was having an affair with men from a dating site. He found out because she accidentally sent him a message meant for her lover. John had suspected her infidelity for a while, and once he got proof, he took her phone and sent her back to her parents' house. He plans to visit them tomorrow for a discussion. We ended the call acknowledging that both of us were in tough situations and agreed to catch up again soon. While I was finishing up unpacking, I waited for John and Molly to come back home. They returned late, happily tipsy. As I continued organizing, they approached me and Molly came up with an idea. "Let's turn our bedroom into Molly's room. We can each sleep in our own workrooms. What do you think? It's a good idea, right? Just make sure Ollie's room is cleared out by tomorrow," she said. I wanted to clarify something and ask them, how much will Molly contribute to groceries and household supplies each month? And since she doesn't plan on staying forever, how long does she intend to stay? My husband started to panic at my questions. What? You want money from unemployed Molly? I'll cover it with my salary, so there's no issue, right? Molly chimed in. As for how long I'll stay, until I'm satisfied. My mom's cooking is too old-fashioned for me and I don't like. She's always nagging me to do laundry and cleaning at home. But here, I can do whatever I want without spending a dime. It's the best. If you don't like it, Anne, why don't we move out? I retorted, then let's split the household expenses. I'll work to cover my share. Feel free to use your salary for yourself and Molly, I told them. They seemed pleased with this, although I added, you'll need to take care of your own chores. They didn't seem to be listening, so I left a note to make it clear. The next day, I visited my brother's workplace because I was worried about him. He's the president of a construction company, taking over after our father passed away last year. When I got there, he was surprised to see me. He asked what's up, and I explained what happened the night before, asking if he could hire me at his company. He agreed, saying our secretary is leaving due to her husband's relocation. Then he told me about his situation. I was shocked to hear that his wife was pregnant, but it was clear the child wasn't his. The messages on the phone John had taken from his child revealed conversations, photos, and videos with her lover. They showed that the man was trying to avoid responsibility after learning about the pregnancy. When I asked my brother if he planned to divorce his wife, he said, it's tough on the kids, but divorce seems like the only solution. So I recommended involving a lawyer for a proper discussion, then I went home. In my room, I couldn't stop thinking about the texts and pictures my brother showed me of his wife's affair. It was hard to shake them off. The sister-in-law I knew was loving and family-oriented, and I admired her for it. But she had betrayed my brother. It felt like losing a close friend, and tears filled my eyes. Despite this, Molly kept knocking on my door, asking for food, but I was too overwhelmed to argue, so I left her be. Then my husband called, even though he should have been at work. I didn't pick up because I knew what he wanted to discuss, and I wasn't in the mood to talk to anyone. Shortly after, I received a text from my brother, asking if I could go with him to see a lawyer the next day. I sent back an OK sticker. I must have dozed off. My husband's yelling woke me up. You didn't even make food for Molly, and you're sleeping? What's up with that? He shouted. I silently handed him a note and pointed to it for him to read. He then said to Molly, let's let her rest today. She seems off. We can talk to her tomorrow, once she's feeling better. I'm not sick. I'm just tired of you guys arguing, I mumbled before falling back asleep. The next morning, without waking my husband, I went to my brother's place. He hadn't slept at all, and his eyes were red. I made breakfast for the kids and drove them to kindergarten. They mentioned, Mommy and Daddy fought and Mommy left. Mommy was the bad one. She left us alone at home, and we cried. Daddy got mad. They seemed to think it might be better without their mom since she got angry easily. I reassured them, if you feel lonely, call Auntie, okay? They cheered up, saying they might get lonely today. They didn't seem too sad about their mom not being there. After dropping the kids off, I went to the lawyer's office with my brother. The lawyer informed us that there was substantial evidence from pictures, videos, messages, and recorded conversations on my sister-in-law's phone. My brother's main aim was to divorce while retaining parental rights. After he shared his story, I got some advice about my own situation with my husband before my brother dropped me off at home. He was planning to gather the family and break the news about the divorce. If anything happens, don't hesitate to call. We'll all be there for you, he said somewhat ominously before leaving. When I walked into the living room, the house was a mess. It seemed like they had attempted to make breakfast, with greasy surfaces in the kitchen and dishes left on the table. I sighed at the sight. As I debated whether to clean up, Molly appeared. Where did you go without making breakfast? John didn't eat anything and left for work. Isn't it your duty as a wife to take care of household chores? She accused me. I retorted, I'm not your maid. Weren't you taught to clean up after yourself since you were a child? Ignoring her insistence that you're the wife, I walked away and headed to my room. When I returned to my room, I found that Molly's belongings had taken over. Confused, I asked her, did you go into my room? Your stuff is in there. What's going on? She replied, I've always loved your room. It suits my neat and cute style perfectly, don't you think? I moved your things into the guest room. Furious, I hurried to the guest room. My computer and belongings were scattered haphazardly. I felt a surge of anger. It was too much to bear. I felt an intense desire for revenge. I'll never forgive her, I vowed. I decided to wait for my husband John to come home, show him the mess, and ask, "Do you still want to live here with Molly?" I prepared myself for any possible outcome. John arrived home earlier than usual, seemingly after a call from Molly. I heard his heavy footsteps approaching the guest room. As I watched him head straight for the guest room, I was sure he already knew about Molly taking over my room and wouldn't support me. When he opened the door and entered looking furious, Molly was right beside him, wearing a smug smile. "You went against Molly. You're the one at fault here, neglecting to make breakfast. Aren't you my wife? Shouldn't you take care of me? Molly is your sister-in-law. You should look after her and tolerate her." I thought bitterly, so this was how it was going to be. In that moment, any love I had for my husband vanished. He didn't defend me, didn't acknowledge Molly's wrongdoing, or suggest she leave or help with chores, or giving my room back. I told him if you're letting Molly stay, I'll invite my brother over. He's never seen our house. Maybe I should call him now. Despite his usual fear of my brother around Molly, John acted boldly. "Are you sure about that? If you bring him here, I'll kick you out," he threatened confidently. I stood my ground. "Go ahead, try to kick me out. I'll call my mother, brother, and his wife, and let them see the house," I declared. Expecting me to beg or cry at his threat, John snapped back, "Don't you dare call your family. If you're not happy, then leave." Molly joined in, asserting, "This is our home with John. You have no right to bring anyone here. Even if they come, we'll just show them the door." Ignoring their warnings, I grabbed my phone and stated, "I'm calling my brother." Turning to John and Molly, I suggested, "Maybe it's best if we all live separately. We can have our own space and enjoy ourselves without any worries." Molly seemed thrilled at the idea of me leaving, with John agreeing. "That does sound like fun. Perhaps it's time for a divorce." Frustrated, I decided to call my family over. Despite John and Molly's excitement about me leaving, I warned, "You'll regret this decision. I'm calling my family now." I dialed my brother and urged my family to come over as soon as possible. My brother's response was swift and reassuring. "We've been expecting your call. We're already on our way." His foresight touched me deeply. Within about 30 minutes, my family arrived. Molly, who had threatened to kick them out earlier, turned pale at the sight of my brother. "Molly, I thought you were going to show my family the door," I remarked. She could only shake her head in response. Seeing her and John's fear after facing my imposing brother was quite satisfying. Both my brothers have been practicing judo since childhood, and their presence is quite intimidating. Standing over 6 feet tall with a buzz cut, my elder brother used to compete nationally until a knee injury in college. Now, he coaches at a local boys' club. My younger brother is just as formidable, also practicing judo and resembling his older sibling closely. Despite being quite memorable, Molly seemed to have forgotten encountering them at the wedding. "We're getting kicked out by who? Aren't you the ones leaving?" My elder brother laughed, prompting Molly to gather her courage and demand, "My brother is divorcing his useless wife now. Please leave." In response, my younger brother retorted, "You're the ones leaving, right? This is Anne's house, built with her share of our father's inheritance and in her name." Meanwhile, my mother busied herself in the kitchen, tidying up and commenting, "What a mess." She then called out, "Let's not waste time. Get to the point." So my brothers complied, turning to me and instructing, "Another person is coming. Let them in when they arrive," before gesturing for John and Molly to sit down. "We have 2 matters to discuss today. First, we need you to leave," my elder brother told them. When Molly asked if the house belonged to me, John hesitated, saying I was involved in the interior design discussions with the contractors, so I thought it was mine, but maybe not. "But I'm the head of the household, right?" John protested, seemingly under the impression that he owned the house by virtue of being the head of the household, without considering its source of funding. Being the head of the household and being the owner of the house are 2 different things, someone pointed out, leaving John speechless. However, Molly remained defiant, citing residency rights. "I won't leave. I have the right to stay," she declared, glaring at me. "Residency rights don't apply here since you're not paying rent," someone countered, leading John to resist further. "But I'm married to Anne. I can't leave. We can't separate," he insisted. At that moment, the doorbell rang, signaling the arrival of the guests my brothers had mentioned. When I opened the door, my sister-in-law, my elder brother's wife, stood there in tears. Before letting her in, I asked my brother how we should handle their presence. My mother offered to take care of their child upstairs. After settling my mother and welcoming my sister-in-law inside, John was shocked to see her. "How did you find out where we live?" he stammered, acting suspiciously. My elder brother intervened, reminding John of their second matter to discuss. John's face drained of color. "What? It seemed he was unaware of her identity as my brother's wife. Realizing his mistake, he attempted to flee but was frozen in place. "Seems like my wife is pregnant with your child. Did you two plan this?" my brother accused, slamming evidence of the affair onto the table. "Well, what's your next move?" "For me, it's divorce, nothing less," he declared. Fearing the consequences, Molly attempted to retreat upstairs. My younger brother wasted no time in instructing Molly. "We've got a truck loaded with boxes. Start packing your things right now." He then left to fetch the boxes himself. Molly, taken aback, asked, "Am I leaving today?" Upon receiving a stern glare from my brother, she seemed to relent. Meanwhile, my elder brother turned to his wife, commanding, "My wife and John can sort this out first. Sign the divorce papers." He handed her the papers and a pen. Although she hesitated upon seeing that custody was assigned to him instead of her, he dismissed her concerns, stating, "That's what the kids want. Your opinion doesn't matter." With tears in her eyes, she signed the papers. Moved by the scene, I saw the tears welling up in my brother's eyes, realizing the emotional toll it had taken on him. Then it was my turn to decide. "Anne, what are you going to do?" my brother asked. Without hesitation, I declared, "I choose divorce too. I want him out of my house as soon as possible." My husband dropped to his knees, begging for forgiveness. "Please, I don't want a divorce. It might not even be my child," he pleaded. However, when my brother revealed that he had undergone surgery to prevent further children, my husband was left speechless. My brother handed me blank divorce papers. "If you want him out right away, why don't you have him sign?" he suggested. Reluctantly, I instructed my husband to sign, which he did. I then presented him with 2 pledge documents prepared by my lawyer. One was for him and the other for Molly, pledging to pay for the damages they caused to the house, totaling roughly $30,000. Additionally, the documents stated that they were never to enter my house again in the future. John glanced at my brother and me, perhaps intending to voice a complaint, but a stern glare from my brother silenced him, and he reluctantly signed the pledge document. His shoulders slumped as he made a feeble attempt to head upstairs to gather his belongings for the move. However, my brother intervened, producing a marriage license. "I got this for you too," he announced, handing it to his wife. Without hesitation, she signed it and urged John to do the same. "You've made a mess of my life, and you can't escape responsibility," she declared with a determined look. John, overwhelmed and tearful, complied, muttering, "Just do whatever you want." Finally, my brother demanded, "You have nothing to say unless I ask, right? Don't you owe me an apology?" John, almost prostrating himself, apologized profusely to my brother. With that settled, we hurriedly packed John's and Molly's belongings into boxes and loaded them onto the awaiting truck, destined for their parents' house. And just like that, my brief married life came to an end. As I contemplated living alone in the now empty house, my mother offered to sell her own house and move in with my younger brother, while my elder brother planned to do the same with his 3 children. It seemed that we were all embarking on a new chapter, albeit in different configurations. My mother and brother have decided to purchase the house from me using the proceeds from selling their own homes. They keep suggesting, "Why not build a new house when we get married again?" But I insist, I'm content with an apartment. We fulfilled the kids' dream of owning a dog, bringing laughter and joy into our lives despite the lingering memories of this house. Meanwhile, my ex-husband reportedly remarried my former sister-in-law 6 months later and now resides with her at his parents' house. He's working tirelessly to pay for the damages to the house, while Molly is treating her new sister-in-law like a maid, causing her to lose her mental stability. Unable to bear seeing her daughter in such a state, Molly's mother kicked her out of the house. Seeking refuge, Molly turned to my ex-husband for help, only to be met with blame. He coldly remarked, "If you hadn't moved in, we'd still be living in that mansion." Left isolated and without support, Molly found herself alone in her troubles. "I thought you were a good daughter-in-law, But it seems I was wrong. Leave this house and never come back. You're nothing but a parasite. Pack your things and go. Ever since my husband passed away, my mother-in-law Sarah and sister-in-law Catherine have been saying mean things to me. Even though I've been taking care of Sarah, my husband was worried about her until the end. And yet Catherine says bad things about him, and I couldn't help but argue back. If you both feel that way, I understand. I'll leave. When I said that, Sarah and Catherine were happy, but a few months later, they were begging me. The bad luck I wished for them was worse than I thought. My name is Emily. I'm 32 years old and work as a buyer for famous brands. I met my husband Tom through a friend. Tom was kind and calm, just the husband I wanted, so I said yes when he proposed. Tom's parents were independent, so I got along well with them and didn't have any problems with my mother-in-law. Having a caring mother-in-law and practical father-in-law seemed perfect to me. Tom worried about his mom's financial future because she didn't think much about money. He thought it would be fine as long as his dad, who was responsible with money, was healthy. Tom also had an older sister, Catherine, who was divorced and lived alone. He figured she'd take care of their parents later on. But Tom didn't fully trust Catherine. I'm worried about giving our family money matters to Catherine. Why? There were problems before. I didn't think much about Catherine's past then, but later, Tom's worries turned out to be true. After I married Tom and had a few peaceful years, his dad got sicker and died. Since Sarah always depended on her husband, she was devastated. It's tough now, Sarah, but let's try to move on. I've always let my husband handle everything. I don't know how to do it alone. Tom was worried about his mom living alone, and I share his concern. As our son, he must have been really stressed about it. Then, one night, he came to me with an idea. Emily, what if my mom comes to live with us? It was unexpected, but I had a feeling he might suggest this someday. But what about Catherine? What about her? Shouldn't she, as the daughter, take care of mom instead of us? I want to step up and take dad's place, looking after mom. She's not great with money, so I'll handle her finances too. Can't we ask Catherine to do that? No, that won't work. It was rare for Tom to firmly say no to my idea. I want to make sure dad's money is well taken care of, so mom won't struggle later on. Even though he felt bad about asking me to live together, Tom was determined to handle dad's inheritance and savings. It's okay. I think we'll all be happy living together with your mom. I'm genuinely worried about her being alone too. Oh, Emily, thank you so much. And so we started our new life as a family of 3 in Sarah's house. Just like she promised, Sarah left everything for her husband to handle, from bank accounts to bills and credit cards. She didn't really understand any of it. Tom managed her money separately from ours and decided to give her a monthly allowance for her expenses. Whenever Sarah was tempted by dodgy salespeople or pressured to buy expensive stuff by friends, it was Tom's job to guide her. If he didn't, she might end up with a lot of debt because she was careless with money. By taking on the role of her husband, Tom made his mom happy. Seeing her happier also made Tom feel better. Sarah helped out with the household chores since I was working, and everything was going smoothly. But our peaceful life came to an abrupt halt. Tom collapsed at work. He had the same illness as his dad and might have pushed himself too hard during a busy time, ending up in the hospital. Sarah and I visited him almost every day, but Tom didn't seem to be getting better. Emily, I need to talk to you about what happens after I'm gone. Don't say that. Let's focus on getting you better so we can go back to living with your mom, just like before. I knew I might get sick like Dad, so I'm prepared. But there's one thing I need you to do for me regarding Mom. Trying to hold back tears, I listened closely to my husband's last request. A few weeks later, Tom passed away. Dealing with telling relatives, sorting things out with his job, and planning the funeral kept me busy and distracted from the grief. Once everything was settled, I remembered what Tom had asked of me. There was no time to mourn now. I had to step into Tom's shoes and take care of my mother-in-law. I'm sorry I've been occupied lately, Sarah. From now on, I'll handle the money matters instead of Tom. Don't worry, I'll make sure we have enough for our monthly expenses. Emily, are you still going to stay with me now that Tom is gone? Absolutely. Tom always told me to take care of you. Let's keep supporting each other. I understand. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she spoke. I'm sorry for putting the burden of finances on you while you're already busy. Don't worry, keeping busy helps me cope, so it's actually helpful. But Catherine didn't seem happy about me living with her mom. When she found out I was not only staying but also handling the money, she burst into the house in anger. Why is Emily, an outsider, still here after Tom's gone? And why is she in charge of the money? Doesn't that seem strange to you? Before Tom passed away, he asked me to take care of Sarah and handle the finances. Are you just saying that conveniently? No, it's what Tom wanted. Is there some hidden reason behind this? And are you using Tom's name to your advantage? Catherine wasn't convinced, but she backed off for the time being. However, the next week she came back furious. Emily, what do you think you're doing? I saw everything. What are you talking about? You're having an affair, aren't you? An affair? I saw you going into a men's store and dining at a fancy restaurant with a man. Are you using Tom's money on your lover? That's not true. I haven't spent any money like that on someone else. Your excuses won't cut it. It hasn't been long since Tom passed away, and you're already moving on to someone new. Have you no shame? Mother, don't you agree? Influenced by Catherine's words, Sarah started to doubt me too. Emily, is it true? No, that's not what happened. I'm just following Tom's wishes, I tried to explain, but Catherine interrupted me. How dare you bring up Tom's name after cheating on him? How could you sink so low? I fell silent, feeling the cold stares from both Catherine and Sarah. Then Sarah spoke up. I used to think you were a good daughter-in-law, but I was wrong. I never want to see you again. Leave, Catherine chimed in triumphantly. That's right, parasites like you don't belong here. Determined not to let Tom's wishes go to waste, I endured it all. With that resolve, I remained silent. But Sarah and Catherine didn't stop there. They continued to hurl hurtful words at me. Poor Tom, picking someone like you. He was always so easily fooled, you know. Maybe he tricked you into thinking he'd handle the money, but actually used Mom's money for himself. To tarnish Tom's memory, especially when he cared so much about his mom, is unforgivable to me. I could handle them saying bad things about me, but I can't stand them insulting my late husband. I'm sorry, Tom, for not keeping our promise. I silently apologized to him as I turned to Sarah and Catherine. I understand. I'll leave like you both want. Hearing my words, the two exchanged looks and grinned. Finally seeing reason, huh? Leave the bank book here when you go. Sure. I handed over the bank book containing Sarah's living expenses and her husband's inheritance, then left the house. But 3 months later, I got a call from Sarah, whom I had distanced myself from. Emily, they're saying I can't pay my card bill. Why? What's happening? Maybe you spent too much and don't have enough left. You should check your balance using your bank book. Balance? How do I do that? It seems Sarah hadn't changed. She was still careless about money even after I left. As I thought this, Sarah started yelling at me angrily. This never happened when you were here. Suddenly after you left, the money's gone. You must have stolen it. I can't believe this. Come here right now. Furious, Sarah hung up the phone. Feeling heavy-hearted, I reluctantly went to her house. When I arrived, both Sarah and Catherine were waiting for me. Ignoring Sarah's anger, I accessed her online banking, checked the balance, and showed it to her. Here's the transaction history for this account. As you can see, while I was managing it, the balance never went negative. Do you understand why? Because I was saving money. It's hard to believe that you, who aren't good with money, would suddenly start saving. Actually, the balance stayed positive because I was depositing $1,500 every month for living expenses. Living expenses? I didn't know about that. Tom and I did it while he was alive. We decided to use our money to cover your expenses, so your savings wouldn't go down. Really? Tom did that? Yes, even after he passed away, I kept doing it with $1,500 from my own salary, but when you asked me to leave, I stopped. Then I continued, showing Sarah the transaction details. Let's see the transactions after I left. There are more than $1,500 being taken out, suggesting big expenses. I didn't change my spending habits. Maybe Catherine used it. With that, I shifted the conversation to Catherine. Looking at the details, there were card payments at fancy stores and restaurants. I can't picture Sarah spending money at those places. Catherine, do you have any clue? It wasn't me, but I can't think of anyone else who might have used it but you. Could it be you? Did you secretly use a family card or something? I've seen you at those shops and restaurants before. Even now, you're still using mom's money. How low can you go? Can you just stop? I was there for work. The meals were for a meeting with a shop owner. Just because I say it's for work, you think you can't trust me. Fine, let's confirm it right now. I immediately called the shop owner. Thank you for always helping us out. Yes, it was last Friday, and the item was... Well, I was checking some details on the phone. Catherine just stared blankly. Thank you. Can you include that as well? Oh, I see. After ending the call and checking my email, I showed Catherine and Sarah the attached photo. It showed Catherine shopping at the store. What's this? Catherine looked shocked as she saw the photo. It seems the security camera caught you, Catherine, buying these luxury items. When I spoke to the shop owner, they confirmed it right away. I'm pretty sure the person in this photo is you. Don't you agree? Catherine was speechless. The shop owner also mentioned that items matching the ones you bought have been showing up at pawn shops lately. The dates and items match the ones when you use the card, right? Catherine's voice shook, and she seemed confused. Sarah, looking puzzled, asked Catherine, but why go through all this trouble? Buying something and then selling it to a pawn shop right away. Since Catherine didn't seem willing to answer, I spoke up. She probably needed cash quickly. If she took it straight from the bank account, it would have been noticed right away. So you tried to frame me by shopping at my workplace, making it look like I was the one spending money, didn't you? Catherine couldn't defend herself and stayed silent. Meanwhile, Sarah seemed to have more questions and kept pressing Catherine. Catherine, why do you need so much money? Well, I had debts to repay, Catherine confessed quietly. But I added more to her confession. You didn't tell Sarah about it, did you? Do you know why Catherine got divorced? It was because of her debts. Tom often mentioned how troubled he was because Catherine kept asking to borrow money. This has been going on since before Catherine got married. Even after she got married, Tom complained that Catherine's spending habits hadn't changed. You had debts. Sarah then remembered something. The money your father left you, Catherine. I gave you a bank book with the inheritance in it, didn't I? Don't tell me even that money. At Sarah's request, I checked the balance of the bank account where the inheritance was kept. Sarah, the bank account is completely empty. What? Completely empty. But a few days after I left the house, all the money was taken out of the account. No, this can't be. Sarah collapsed to her knees, yelling at Catherine in anger. What's the problem? I had to meet my repayment deadline. My father would have let me, his daughter, use the inheritance however I wanted. I can't believe Sarah is so stunned. It seems Tom was right all along. He always said letting Catherine handle money was risky. He probably saw this coming. Sarah gave Catherine a stern look. That money wasn't just for me, you know. You got your share of the inheritance, right? Who uses someone else's money? You're the one taking advantage of this house. Leave. We're done, Mom. Wait, didn't we agree that I would live here in Emily's place after she left? If I stay with someone like you, I'll end up in debt too. I expect you to return every cent of your father's inheritance. With those words, Sarah forcefully kicked Catherine out of the house. However, I'm unsure if it was the right outcome. Since then, we've lost all contact with Catherine, and Sarah never got back any of the misused inheritance. If she still had it, Sarah could have lived comfortably in her old age. But now, she lives in poverty and loneliness. On the other hand, even though Catherine used the inheritance to pay off her debts, her spending habits didn't change, and she's accumulated even more debt. Without money to repay her debts, she keeps moving to avoid her loan sharks. Only now do I truly feel the weight of Tom's passing. Though things turned out differently from Tom's last wish, I believe I haven't done anything wrong. Tom wanted me to prioritize my happiness above all else. Living with Sarah and Catherine would have gone against Tom's wishes for our well-being. I believe he would understand. From now on, with memories of Tom in my heart, I'll take a new step forward. On the day we were supposed to start our honeymoon, he surprised me by giving me papers that said he wanted a divorce. He said he was taking his whole family on the trip, and if I didn't like it, we could split up. Inside, I was furious. Okay, fine, I thought to myself. But remember, I'm still free. He looked shocked as I stood there feeling triumphant. My name is Emma. I'm 35 years old, and I work at a real estate company. I really enjoy my job and feel happy doing it. I'm lucky to have supportive colleagues, but in my personal life, I don't have any specific hobbies, and I've never had a boyfriend. I felt a secret worry growing inside me. All my friends were getting married by the time they hit 30, one after the other. I was one of the few left who was still single. Plus, my younger colleagues were leaving our company one after another, and it hurt every time. Then, I met Brian through a friend's introduction. He was 2 years younger than me and had a smile that made me feel warm and protective. He didn't talk much but always listened to what I had to say when we needed to make decisions. He made me feel like my thoughts mattered. Since I had no experience with relationships before, I quickly fell for Brian's personality. Our relationship progressed smoothly. When I brought up the topic of marriage, he simply said, "Okay, let's do it." Marriage involves making lots of decisions: the wedding, the honeymoon, finding a new home to live in together. It's a huge event in a person's life, so I wanted us to decide things together. But no matter what decision we faced, Ryan always let me take the lead. He never shared his own thoughts. He just agreed with whatever I said. Brian's personality began to seem unreliable to me, and I started feeling unsatisfied with him. Another thing bothering me was my relationship with my mother-in-law. She was completely different from Brian, not easygoing at all. She never listened to my opinions and always imposed her own ideas on me. "Emma, when you get married, you'll quit your job and focus on taking care of the house, right? You're not getting any younger, you know. If you don't hurry, you might not be able to have kids. Brian is working hard, so as a woman, you should focus on the family. It's a wife's duty to support her husband." These were the first things she said to me when I went to greet her. The husband works outside and the wife takes care of the home. She clung to old-fashioned ideas like this. The truth is, I earn more money than Brian does. He doesn't seem to mind, and he's even told his parents about it, but his mother doesn't seem to approve. A woman who earns more than a man isn't charming. Maybe you can't do any household chores, can you? A wife should cook, do laundry, clean, and take care of her husband's health. Can you do that? She said, looking down on me. You're right, it's definitely different when it's your mother-in-law saying those things. While it's not something to boast about, I can handle all the household chores because I've been living alone for a long time, and I don't plan on quitting my job after getting married. I want to prioritize myself just as much as Brian. But when my mother-in-law criticized me, Brian didn't stand up for me. Instead, he just nodded along with her. That made me feel uneasy about relying on him for the rest of my life. But then again, Brian is younger than me. Maybe he'll become more dependable as he gets older. If this marriage doesn't work out, I might never get married at all. My mind is torn between anxiety and desires, stuck in an endless conflict. But time doesn't wait, even when I'm troubled. There are so many decisions to make for the wedding. Where to go for the honeymoon, arranging time off from work, and more. The to-do list keeps growing, and it's making me feel even more uneasy. I was juggling busy days, preparing for both work and marriage. One day, I talked to Brian about our plans. Considering our work schedules, we can only take a long vacation at this time. So should we have our honeymoon during this period? I asked. Yeah, that sounds good to me, Brian replied. Both of us had similar quiet periods at work, so this was our only chance for a long vacation. But there was a problem with the wedding. The venue I've always dreamed of is so popular that it's booked for over a year in advance. In that case, what do you think about having the honeymoon before the wedding? I checked, and some people do that. If we have the wedding first, it will be another 2 years before we can go on the trip. If you're okay with it, Emma, then I'm fine with it too, Brian said. I thought Brian wouldn't object, but he agreed so easily. It seemed like he was accepting all my opinions without any resistance. While I did want him to express his own thoughts a bit more, I figured it was better than facing opposition. So whenever I got the chance, I kept moving forward with the preparations for our honeymoon and wedding. In the end, we settled on going to Europe for our honeymoon. I debated until the last minute between Hawaii and Europe. Hawaii was close by, and I figured we could visit there another time. So I chose to explore Italy and France, enjoying the beautiful streets and delicious food. I also wanted to check out the stylish accessories and maybe buy some special tableware since it marked the start of our new life together. After considering various schedules and destinations, I finished all the paperwork about a month before the trip. By then, I was completely excited. It was going to be my first overseas adventure, and I couldn't help but feel thrilled. My mind was consumed with thoughts about Europe, from buying travel essentials to planning our activities there. Because of this excitement, any lingering dissatisfaction I had with Brian had disappeared completely. Just 1 week before our honeymoon, Brian suddenly brought up a conversation. I was puzzled by Brian's unusual request. He rarely asked me for anything, so I was curious about what it could be. Could it be related to our trip? Did he find a place he wanted to visit? I was filled with anticipation as I asked him, "What's wrong?" Brian innocently made his request, saying, "I want to go see Taylor when we're in Paris. Mom really wants to go there." I was taken aback. "Your mother-in-law?" "Wait, what do you mean?" I couldn't keep up with this sudden turn of events, but Brian seemed to think it was obvious. "Well, since everyone else is going, we'll all be together even during the trip, right?" "What do you mean by everyone?" "It's our honeymoon, so it's obvious that it's just you and me going." "But my mom thinks it's normal for the whole family to go," Brian explained. "First of all, I only made reservations for 2 people. You and me, Brian. The deadline for booking was 7 days ago. Today is the last day to register. Whether we go together or not, I only booked for 2 people, so it was impossible for the whole family to join. If you ask the travel agency, they might be able to sort something out," Brian suggested. I was stunned by Brian's statement when suddenly, the intercom in the house rang. On the screen, I saw my in-laws. Without any regard for my surprise, they entered the house with a load of bags. Ignoring my objections, my mother-in-law's eyes sparkled as she declared, "I thought I'd leave the luggage here since we're leaving soon. I'm so excited." Brian chimed in, "Just leave the luggage here," and began leading them into the room without asking for my consent. "Wait a minute." I tried to stop him urgently, but my mother-in-law shot me a sharp look. "What's the matter, Emma? I hope you're not suddenly saying you don't want to go together now." "I never agreed to go together in the first place," I retorted, but my mother-in-law paid no attention. "You heard it, she just said no, didn't you?" "But Brian always thought we would go together with you, right?" she asked, trying to flatter Brian. Brian simply replied, "Yeah," affirming her statement. Seizing on his agreement, my mother-in-law began to dismiss me. "It's normal for the husband's parents to go on the honeymoon. Don't you have common sense? I hope you won't ruin the trip with any unpleasant experiences since it's a special honeymoon. We want to make good memories, right? I'll make sure to teach you some common sense during this week before we leave. It's supposed to be a special honeymoon after all." I felt like everything was falling apart. My blood was boiling with frustration. "Mother-in-law, this is a honeymoon, you know. Normally, it's just supposed to be the husband and wife," I insisted desperately. If I listened to my mother-in-law's demands now, it would set a bad precedent for the future. I wanted to avoid that at all costs. However, my mother-in-law stubbornly refused to back down. Not only that, but she began to dismiss my concerns altogether. "The husband's parents going on the honeymoon together is just common sense. I can't believe you don't want to be with us. I thought we were becoming a family, but it seems our ideas of common sense are different. You don't seem to like me, and nothing seems to match." "How sad," she said, lowering her eyebrows in a fake manner. Her words, "how sad," seemed to have a hidden smirk behind them. I was convinced she was deliberately trying to trap me. That's how sure I was. Even Brian, without questioning, started blaming me based on my mother-in-law's words. "Emma, what's wrong with you? They're my parents. It's okay for us to go on the honeymoon together, right?" "It's not possible. We've already booked reservations for 2 people. Plus, I've never heard of families joining a honeymoon trip," I declared. Brian shouted angrily, as if looking for a fight. "I never realized you disliked my parents so much, Emma. That's enough, just leave for today," Brian said, looking at me as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. As he spoke, a wicked smile spread across my mother-in-law's face. Why does he always take his mother's side without even considering his spouse's opinion, especially at a time like this? I wished he would support my views. Before I could react to his words, I found myself pushed out to the entrance. Just before the door closed, I caught a glimpse of my mother-in-law's smug expression. Left outside, I felt powerless. Why am I being portrayed as the bad guy? Why does everything, even this special trip, have to be ruined? Frustration and sadness consumed me, and tears began to flow. A few hours later, I received a message from Brian. "I want you to see if it's still possible for them to join the tour. If not, we'll cancel this trip and find a tour where all 4 of us can go. Please think rationally. If you reconsider, we can sort it out properly. I don't believe I'm in the wrong." It seems like there's no reason for you to apologize or respond. Brian hasn't contacted you since his last message, and it's likely he's upset too. Time passed, and the day of your honeymoon departure finally arrived. Despite feeling unable to enjoy it in your current state, you had spent a month preparing for this trip, so you couldn't refuse. As you were getting ready to leave, the intercom rang, and it was Brian coming to pick you up. You hadn't seen each other since the incident, so you didn't know how to act around him. His arrival indicated that he still intended to go on the trip, but strangely, he didn't have any luggage with him. Instead, he handed you divorce papers. After hurting my parents, you still planned to go on this trip, didn't you? He accused. I'm taking my whole family on this honeymoon. If you don't like it, let's get a divorce. My mom said it would be better that way, he added, thrusting the papers in front of you. In that moment, you finally saw his true colors. You had thought he would listen to you and prioritize your feelings, that he was a kind person. But it turned out he didn't have his own opinions, and he put his family before you. That's who Brian truly is. As I came to that realization, my feelings for him began to cool down. Even if I were to marry him, I couldn't see myself overcoming the challenges that lay ahead and becoming a family with his mother-in-law. It just seemed impossible. Determined, I pointed at the divorce papers in front of me and said, "Sure, but remember, I'm still single, you know." "Huh?" Brian exclaimed, clearly surprised by my words. "Single? What do you mean? Weren't you listening? We talked about going on the honeymoon but delaying the registration until the day of the ceremony. I made sure to get your permission, Brian. You didn't forget, did you? The marriage certificate is still in the drawer, and you even said, 'If you are fine with it, Emma, then I'm fine too.' That's right, divorce or not, we're not even married yet. There's no problem with going on the honeymoon with my maiden name." Maybe you remembered my words. Brian's expression suddenly changed, but then he turned red and raised his voice in frustration. "Are you out of your mind to give up on marriage just because of a honeymoon? Get a grip." I responded, matching Brian's intensity with my own strong voice. "This is the result of me being rational. I've been so desperate to get married that I couldn't see reality clearly. I don't think I can be happy marrying someone who doesn't listen to their future spouse's opinions and doesn't support them. I'd rather stay single for life. Thanks for making me realize that. Haste makes waste." I keenly felt that this saying was true. "Hey Emma, let's calm down and start over from scratch, okay?" He looked like he was about to cry. His pleading voice trembled. "But I won't be fooled anymore. I will break free from this guy." Without realizing it, I found myself shouting loudly at Brian. "If you're so desperate for a family trip, why don't you go with your family of 3? But in return, you'll have to plan everything from the tour reservations to the itinerary all by yourself. After always relying on others, it's about time you experience the difficulty yourself. If you think you can handle it, go ahead, you indecisive man." I pulled out the marriage certificate from the drawer and tore it to shreds in front of Brian. His mouth hung open in shock at the sudden turn of events. Overwhelmed by my determination, Brian was completely taken aback. "Do you understand how serious I am now? I refuse to have a future that's dark. It's over between us. Why don't you go back to your beloved mommy and cry to her, you mama's boy?" Leaving a stunned Brian behind, I slammed the front door shut. Given his demeanor, he might actually go cry to his mother. I could easily imagine that happening. Afterward, I contacted the tour company to cancel our reservations. Since it was a same-day cancellation, we were charged 100% of the fee. I billed Brian for the entire amount since he was the one who ruined our honeymoon. It felt like the right thing to do. Later, Brian blamed me for the failed marriage and spread rumors about it to those around us. However, it seemed that no one sympathized with him among our relatives and coworkers. Instead, he started to be seen as an unconventional mama's boy due to his past actions and was disliked by many. When I told my parents about the divorce, they were initially surprised but quickly accepted it. Marriage isn't the only source of happiness. As long as you're happy, Emma, that's what matters. I couldn't be more grateful for my mother's words. As a side note, since then, my hobby has become traveling. I felt it would be a waste to let long vacations go to waste, so I embarked on my first solo trip. Going overseas alone was a bit daunting, but I enjoyed a relaxing time in historic cities I had always wanted to visit. Wow, being alone is actually quite enjoyable. Thanks to the historical adventure trip, I've started to fully enjoy solo traveling. Whenever I have time off on my next break, I'm planning to embark on my next overseas trip. I've begun a life where I won't let myself be controlled by marriage alone. My mother-in-law told me that anyone who doesn't help with housework isn't welcome here. She seemed to expect me to feel sorry and beg for forgiveness. My husband, sitting beside her, had a smirk on his face, like he was enjoying watching me get scolded. But instead of feeling upset, I surprisingly felt calm. "I'll leave then," I said firmly, without any doubt. "I won't worry about what happens to them anymore." In that moment, I realized they should regret their own behavior. I'm Susan, 42 years old. I work full-time and take care of our home. My husband John and I have 2 grown-up kids who have moved out and are living their own lives. John and I were supposed to be enjoying our time together, but now we're living with my mother-in-law. After our kids moved out, my mother-in-law, who lost her husband, came to live with us. Our peaceful life with my husband changed a lot because of her presence. My job keeps me busy and I often work late, sometimes not getting home until after 8 p.m. Lately, when I come back, I'm frustrated by what I see. The living room is a mess, with snacks and clothes scattered around, and my husband is lounging on the sofa, watching TV and drinking beer without caring about the mess. He doesn't even acknowledge me when I arrive. Dinner isn't prepared, and I can't help but feel disappointed. Ignoring the mess, I go straight to the kitchen to start making dinner as usual. Then my mother-in-law pops her head out of her room and starts lecturing me, as if I'm the one to blame for everything. "You're back so late again. I'm starving. You're always talking about overtime and business trips, but you never take care of the house. You're not a good homemaker." My mother-in-law accuses me, using my late returns as an excuse to criticize my housework. She nitpicks at everything that bothers her and blames me for it all. In these situations, I've learned it's best to just leave her alone until she calms down. Arguing or defending myself only makes things worse. So I pretend to reflect on her words and focus on cooking. Her words hurt, but I endure it because I know she'll eventually quiet down. What's even harder to bear is how my husband seems to enjoy seeing me scolded by my mother-in-law. Women should appreciate their husbands. "You lack charm." My mother-in-law repeats her usual phrases. "That's right, isn't it?" My husband chimes in, mocking the situation. As I serve dinner, I feel anger bubbling up towards my mother-in-law. But it's my husband's behavior that annoys me the most. Despite my repeated requests for them to finish dinner on their own when I'm late, they never listen. Even when I start cooking, they just sit and wait for me to serve the food, as if I'm their personal maid. Our situation has deteriorated since my mother-in-law moved in with us. Before that, my husband used to help with the housework. We managed to raise our kids while both of us worked because of his help. When I was late, he'd make dinner, feed the kids, and take care of things. But now, he's changed. He stopped helping and started joining my mother-in-law in criticizing me. It's confusing and frustrating. My mother-in-law calls me lazy and incompetent, but she's the one who's dependent on us. She hasn't contributed anything towards expenses, even though she inherited money when her husband died. She wasted it on expensive things, ran out of money, and even got into debt. Now she's living with us, basically for free. It all started on the first day we lived together. My mother-in-law announced she'd be more considerate from now on. She bowed deeply, showing humility, but just 3 days later, she started criticizing me again for neglecting housework. At first, her sudden change amused me, but it quickly became serious. She implied I wasn't a good wife because I focused on my job too much. She didn't just complain about housework, she also criticized my job. I explained that I had to work late sometimes, but she didn't listen. Instead, she suggested I take a part-time job at a nearby supermarket. She had her idea of what a daughter-in-law should be, but she didn't understand my job at all. Living with her was a headache. If she didn't like something, like our meal choices, she'd complain. Even simple things like breakfast became a problem. We used to eat bread or buy lunch, but she didn't like that. Now, she reluctantly follows our rules, but she grumbles about it. Dinner is the biggest issue. She insists on dinner at 6 p.m. with at least 3 side dishes, and everyone must eat together. She says that's what a normal family does. But my job often keeps me past 6 p.m., and quitting isn't an option because it would hurt our finances. Is it because John's salary isn't enough? My mother-in-law accuses, refusing to believe that I work to support our family. When I look to my husband for support, he just brushes it off, saying I'll eventually learn my lesson. He doesn't defend me, which only adds to my frustration. My husband seems to enjoy playing the role of the understanding and tolerant husband who can't do housework. This annoys me even more. When we first moved in with my mother-in-law, he took her side instead of mine, which was disappointing. Since then, they've both treated me unfairly, as if they're teaming up against me. Whenever I try to get my husband to help with housework, my mother-in-law stops me, saying it's the wife's job. My husband doesn't stand up for me or try to stop her, even though we used to get along well. Now I wonder why things have changed. But then I realize something. My husband smirks every time my mother-in-law criticizes me. Maybe he has a problem with the fact that I earn more than him. He probably doesn't want to do housework either, but he can't complain because he's supposed to be the provider. I think he's been enjoying this situation all along. When my mother-in-law moved in, she often scolded me, questioning if John was the head of the family. It seemed to give him some sort of satisfaction to see me getting yelled at. It made me realize how narrow-minded my husband, whom I had been with for so long, truly was. After that, I spent days worrying about what to do. My mother-in-law was still causing a fuss, and my husband wasn't reliable. But back in the quiet days before my mother-in-law arrived, I lacked the courage to make any decisions. One day, while I was out shopping, a neighbor called out to me and made an unexpected comment. She said I should be more considerate of my mother-in-law. I was surprised and asked her what she meant. She said she didn't particularly like her own mother-in-law, but she didn't think she was being inconsiderate. Then she dropped a bombshell. She had heard about me from my mother-in-law. According to her, I didn't do any housework. The house was always dirty and messy. The laundry piled up. My mother-in-law's rheumatism got worse because she couldn't do chores. And her son came home late from work. It was shocking to hear how I was being portrayed. I don't do anything, and that's why we only eat bread for every meal. My mother-in-law has been crying and complaining about this situation. Lately, I've noticed that people in the neighborhood aren't reacting warmly to me. It dawned on me that it's because of the lies my mother-in-law has been spreading. My small, frail mother-in-law knows how to get sympathy from others. She's probably portraying herself as a suffering mother-in-law dealing with a lazy daughter-in-law who doesn't do any housework. The neighbor looked at me with cold, accusing eyes, and I felt ashamed that our family issues were spreading to the neighborhood. I don't think that's true. I mumbled and quickly went back home. When I walked into the living room, my mother-in-law was watching TV and munching on snacks. "Please stop spreading rumors," I said firmly as I hurried home. My mother-in-law laughed and admitted, "But it's true." I couldn't take it anymore. Something inside me snapped. If she wanted to believe her lies, then fine. From that moment on, I stopped doing any household chores. The next day, when I got home from work, my mother-in-law was yelling as usual, demanding dinner. Ignoring my husband and mother-in-law's remarks, I grabbed a cup of instant ramen noodles from my stash and only made enough for myself. My mother-in-law, seeing this, turned red and continued to yell. "So now you're proving you're the worst daughter-in-law who doesn't do any housework, huh? Fine, if that's how you want to be." As I calmly slurped my noodles, my mother-in-law couldn't come up with a response. She turned to my husband, crying for support. When he finally approached me, I explained what had happened. "Mom's been telling everyone I'm a terrible daughter-in-law who doesn't do any housework." When I asked her to stop, she insisted it was true. So I've decided to stop doing any chores. I'll do exactly what she's been telling everyone. I recounted yesterday's events to my husband. He tried to calm me down, looking troubled. "Mom probably exaggerated things. Don't be so stubborn." Even though my own mother-in-law was bad-mouthing me and it was her fault, my husband still took her side. I didn't even have the energy to argue. I threw the empty cup noodles away, ignored my husband, and went straight to the bathroom. I did my laundry and took a bath alone. As I soaked in the tub, I felt a sense of relief. I should have done this from the beginning. It didn't matter if I did housework or not. I was always labeled a bad wife anyway. From then on, I stopped doing anything. My mother-in-law complained about the lack of breakfast bread. On my day off, when I woke up and went to the living room, she ordered me to go buy bread immediately. "Why don't you go buy it yourself? I'm a bad wife, so I'll only buy my own share. And from now on, either pay for your food or take care of it yourself," I told her, ignoring her. I made myself coffee and ate my own bread, quickly finishing my meal. Seeing my mother-in-law's reaction, I worried I might have been too harsh. But given everything I'd endured, it felt like the least I could do. Afterwards, I only tidied up my own space in a crowded living room and settled down to read a book. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Looking at the monitor, I saw more than 5 elderly people, all familiar faces, looking clearly angry. Confused, I watched as my mother-in-law hurried to open the door. The elderly people lined up outside started coming in one by one. I was stunned when one of them suddenly yelled at me, "I hear you're the wicked woman who doesn't even prepare meals for her own mother-in-law." These elderly people were my mother-in-law's siblings and her spouses. She had told them a false story about how she was mistreated by me, her daughter-in-law. She claimed I didn't feed her properly or let her take a bath, and she asked for their help. My mother-in-law is the youngest of 5 siblings with 4 older brothers and sisters. With their spouses included, there were 9 elderly people accusing me of being a demon wife who deserved punishment. Being criticized by so many people made me break out in cold sweat from fear. "This is a misunderstanding." I finally managed to argue back, my voice trembling. But then my mother-in-law's eldest brother raised his voice. "Stop making excuses," he shouted, banging the floor with his cane. The others joined in, demanding I apologize and reflect on my actions. My husband arrived after hearing the commotion. My mother-in-law's brother turned to him and criticized my upbringing. My husband didn't defend me. Instead, he criticized me too. He only cared about himself, not me. Any affection I had for him disappeared at that moment. I used to think my husband was kind until we started living with my mother-in-law. But he's not kind, he's just weak, unable to stand up to pressure. He's easily swayed by the opinions of others. One of my mother-in-law's brothers took my husband's words seriously and suggested we divorce. Everyone agreed. My mother-in-law said they might give me another chance if I promised to change and serve her and my husband better in the future. Holding back tears, her siblings told me to be grateful, saying I wouldn't find a kinder mother-in-law anywhere else. They decided they'd take turns each week to check if I was doing the chores and serving my mother-in-law and husband. Once the conversation was over, everyone seemed satisfied. They planned to go out for sushi since they were all together for the first time in a while, and they all left the house. As they left, my mother-in-law made a parting shot, saying the house should be clean and laundry done by the time they got back. Why did it have to come to this? Alone in the messy living room, tears started to well up. We used to be happily married until my mother-in-law moved in. Why am I being complained about by all the relatives despite doing my best? Tears streamed down my face, a mix of sadness, regret, and anger. After a few hours, my husband and mother-in-law returned home. I was still sitting in the messy living room. My mother-in-law smirked and sneered, "Leave. We don't need a wife who doesn't do housework. I told you to clean up earlier, didn't I?" Seemingly tipsy, my mother-in-law ordered me to leave immediately. My husband joined in, his face grinning, thinking this would make me obey quietly. But I had no desire to keep working hard for them, or to do anything for them anymore. "Fine, I'll leave then," I said calmly and got up to leave the living room. Behind me, I heard my mother-in-law and husband laughing, thinking I was bluffing. I didn't care anymore about their reaction. I packed my things in my room and left the house without saying another word to them. About 2 weeks later, my mother-in-law called me. "John says he has no money." "What does that mean?" She seemed frantic. I told her the truth. "John earns only a third of what I do. I've been covering our expenses with my salary, and the house is in my name, so please leave soon. I'm going to sell it," I urged her, but she insisted it was a joke. I told her to check the bank book in her drawer to see for herself. On the other end of the phone, my mother-in-law fell silent, seemingly shocked by my husband's low salary. Then she started to panic, begging me to come back because she was sorry and my husband was lonely. But I had made up my mind to divorce my husband. I told her I would handle everything through a lawyer and hung up the phone, ignoring her tearful apologies. Later, with the help of a lawyer, I filed for divorce, citing the actions of my mother-in-law and husband as the reason. The divorce was granted, and I felt relieved. I even received a small consolation payment. When I told my children about the divorce and what had happened, they supported me, agreeing that it was my husband and mother-in-law's fault. After that, I sold the house, and my husband and mother-in-law moved out. They had to stay with relatives temporarily since they had lost their home. As a result, my mother-in-law's lies were exposed, and it seems that my husband and mother-in-law were rejected by their relatives. I've heard they are now living in a small apartment together, struggling due to my husband's low salary. They spend their days blaming each other for my departure. My husband frequently messages me, asking for reconciliation now that he's cut ties with his mother. However, I'm considering blocking him soon because it's becoming bothersome. Without their nagging, I feel free. I plan to live my life gracefully from now on, focusing on myself. My sister and parents told me firmly, "You can't stay here anymore. Please leave the place where you work from home. You're just depending on us." They didn't want me and my dog around anymore. I felt like they were finished talking about it. I answered, "If that's how you feel, then I'll do what I want," already thinking about my next moves. Let me tell you about myself. I'm Le, a 41-year-old woman who works as a freelance web designer. I can work from anywhere because of the internet and my home office setup. I like having my own space and being able to choose my own schedule. But things changed 5 years ago when my parents showed up at my house without warning. When they arrived, they started looking around and hinted at big changes. "Your house is big, Lisa," my mom said, glancing around. "It seems like we could live here too, especially with that spare room," my dad added. They seemed to think they could move in with me without even asking. But I never wanted to live with them, and I told them so. "Wait a minute. I don't want to live with you," I said, surprised by their suggestion. "What are you even talking about?" My dad got really mad and snapped back at me. "You've basically taken control of this house, claiming it was from your Uncle Michael, and now you're acting like it's yours. You're sinking pretty low." I tried to explain the truth, saying, "I didn't just take it. I talked to Uncle Michael, and he agreed to give it to me." But my parents were already set on moving in. They said, "Our old house is falling apart, and we can't stay there anymore." Since my mom didn't work and my dad's job didn't pay enough for big repairs, they felt like they had no choice but to move into the house Uncle Michael left me. I felt stuck because I didn't want to leave my parents with nowhere to go, so I reluctantly let them move in. But once they were settled, they started making snarky comments. They teased me saying, "Hey, Lisa, you're in your 40s now. When are you going to settle down?" They always brought up my single status. I'd tell them I love my job and I'm happy with my life. But they and others kept worrying about my love life, thinking I should do what my sister did and get married. But my sister's married life wasn't all smooth sailing either. Still, I wasn't bothered by their comments. I kept telling them that I'm happy with how things are. But one time, my mom overheard our conversation and jumped in. "Don't talk about your sister like that. She's married and has a stable job," she interrupted. I defended myself, saying, "I might not be married, but I have a good job too." But my mom didn't buy it. She kept criticizing me, saying, "You're always on your computer. Are you even making money legally?" I stood my ground, saying, "I earn my money honestly through my work. You don't need to worry." My mom didn't like my answer and scolded me, saying, "How dare you talk back to me? You're nothing like your sister." Being compared to my sister by our parents was something I was used to. She worked in an office temporarily while I chose to work from home. Even though I knew our parents might not understand working remotely, it still hurt to be put down all the time. One day, while I was cooking dinner, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. I was surprised to find my sister Carol there, carrying a lot of luggage. "Hey Carol, what's up?" "It's been a while," I said, surprised by her sudden visit. "I know it's sudden, but I'll be staying here from now on," Carol said urgently. I was confused and said, "Staying here? I didn't hear anything about this." Carol explained, "Didn't Mom and Dad tell you? I got divorced, so I'll be staying with you now." Even though I was shocked at first, I tried to be welcoming and didn't show my surprise. Carol went upstairs and claimed an empty room as hers. My parents supported her, and I couldn't say anything against it. After that, my stress levels went up. Carol, since her divorce, had quit her job and spent her time gossiping about me with our mom. "Mom, do you like this dress?" Carol would ask, showing off something she bought. "Oh, it's lovely, Carol. You look so pretty," Mom would say. Then Carol would turn to me and say, "What do you think? It's not something Lisa would wear, right?" They kept watching me closely and saying mean things, but I chose not to let it bother me. Even though I wanted to snap back at them, I didn't. I realized that if I reacted to their mean words, it would only make things worse. So I stayed strong and didn't let their teasing get to me. One day, I decided to focus on my own happiness no matter what others said. Then something amazing happened. My close friend got 4 cute puppies. This changed everything for me. When I saw those adorable pups, I instantly fell in love. I thought carefully and decided to adopt a tiny black chihuahua from the litter. I named him Charlie. Charlie was full of energy and mischief, with big, shiny eyes and a tail that wagged like crazy whenever he saw me. I had always wanted a chihuahua, and having Charlie with me brought so much joy, especially since I often worked from home. His company made my days much brighter. I'm calling you Charlie from now on, okay? Woof, I told him, sealing our bond. I was so excited about bringing Charlie home that I didn't talk to my family about it. But it was my house, and I was the one taking care of Charlie, so I didn't think they would mind. When I introduced Charlie to my family, my parents and sister Carol weren't happy. They hadn't known I was planning to get a dog, and they didn't like the idea of potential dog smells in the house. They made it clear they weren't pleased. We had no idea you were getting a dog, they said. Don't dogs smell? I hate bad smells, someone added. Lisa, how could you bring a dog home without talking to us first? They scolded me. Despite their complaints, I stood my ground. It's my house, and I felt Charlie and I needed each other. Having him here makes me happy, and that's what matters, I said firmly. I hope they'd soon see Charlie the way I did. I explained that Charlie wasn't just any dog, he was a gift from a friend. Plus, I was the one paying for everything Charlie needed, so they didn't really have a reason to complain. What I choose to have in my house is my choice. I added firmly, if you're not happy, you're welcome to leave. At first, they were clearly annoyed and upset. But within a few hours, something amazing happened. Charlie's cuteness won them over completely. They couldn't stop playing with him, saying things like, aren't you adorable? Are you moms, dads, or sissies? Look over here, sweetie. It was like their frustration had vanished. My whole family fell in love with Charlie, and his presence changed their attitudes completely. From then on, our house was filled with love for Charlie. Because of him, the tension between me and my family eased, and we had peaceful days together. But as life goes, something happened that disturbed our peace. While I was out running an errand, my sister Carol called me urgently. She sounded upset and said, "Come home now." Surprised by her urgency, I asked her what was wrong. She angrily explained over the phone. It's not what happened, it's what Charlie did. He peed on my clothes. What if they smell? I tried to reassure her, saying just wash them quickly and they'll be fine. Plus, isn't it your fault for leaving your clothes on the floor? Carol shot back, what? It's my fault. It's your lack of training that's the problem. I sighed, realizing it was a small issue. Calm down, Carol. Charlie is still a puppy. If you take him for a walk, he won't go in the house. Weren't you planning to walk him today? Did you actually do it? I had planned to take Charlie for a walk later that day, but I didn't realize it would cause such chaos in my family. The problem was that I hadn't properly trained Charlie, our beloved dog, and now we were facing the consequences. When I got home, I could feel the tension in the air. My sister Carol was clearly angry and immediately confronted me. She had already told our parents about what happened, and they were also looking at me with disapproval as Carol's clothes lay on the floor, stained. Carol, upset, threw the dirty clothes at me. You're paying for the cleaning, she said angrily. Why should I pay? I argued. You didn't take him for a walk and left your clothes all over the floor. My parents quickly joined in, urging me to take responsibility. Lisa, shouldn't you apologize to Carol? They suggested. This mess happened because of Charlie. As they continued blaming me, I couldn't help but defend Charlie. Can't we cut Charlie some slack? Puppies make mistakes, just like babies, I argued. But my family was set on blaming both me and Charlie. This is all because of that dumb dog, my sister snapped again. Lisa, you're lucky you didn't get married. You probably couldn't even raise a kid properly. Her words stung, and I grew frustrated. How can you say that? I protested. If you had taken him for walks and kept the house clean, none of this would have happened. My sister had had enough. She pointed at me and said, I'm done with this. Things had gone from a simple pet accident to personal attacks, showing there were bigger issues within our family. Despite the tension, I knew it was important to stay calm and talk things through, focusing on training Charlie and improving communication within our family. Her words hit me hard. What? I said, shocked. Did you really just say that? I'm standing my ground, my sister said firmly. We don't need someone like you here, wrecking our home, she continued, her words cutting deep, especially since she knew I didn't have a job at the moment. I was stunned. Didn't they realize I was the one paying the bills? As I stood there, shocked by my sister's hurtful words, even my parents sided with her. "You should leave, Lisa. Your presence only makes things worse," they said, echoing her sentiments. I couldn't take it anymore. "You're all bringing bad luck. Just go," we all shouted together, the tension thick in the air. "That's it. I've had enough," I finally said. "If this is how it's going to be, fine." With that, I took charge. I quickly packed my things and left the house with Charlie wrapped in a towel. Revenge crossed my mind, but I knew this wasn't the end. A few days later, as I expected, my sister called me in a panic. "Lisa, help. What's going on with the house?" she asked, sounding anxious. Intrigued by this new development in our family drama, I asked, "What happened? Why do we have to leave all of a sudden?" "We've been told to leave by the end of this month," she said, sounding stressed. It hit me hard, and I couldn't help but wonder if this was a lesson for my family about being more compassionate and understanding. "Why do we have to leave all of a sudden?" Carol asked, her voice shaking with confusion. "I've decided to sell the house," I told her firmly. Carol froze, clearly shocked. "You can't do that. It's not your decision," she said, trying to process what I just said. "The house officially became mine a month ago," I revealed, a fact I hadn't shared until now. "Uncle Michael gave it to me, and the title is in my name." "You're joking, right?" Carol's disbelief was clear. "Even if Uncle Michael transferred the title to you, you can't just sell the house like that." "I get your concern," I said, trying to reassure her. "But after you told me to leave, I talked to Uncle Michael. He confirmed that the house is mine now, Carol. He told me to do what I think is best and suggested I distance myself from the family as soon as possible." Carol was shocked, struggling to process this news. "Seriously," she muttered. As we talked, I suspected my parents might be listening in on the conversation. Sure enough, they soon chimed in. "Come on, Lisa, think about what you're doing. We have nowhere else to go," they said, trying to appeal to my sense of family loyalty. "You can't do this to your own family. If you're a good daughter, you'll respect your parents," they added, their tone quiet but firm. "Respect? What are you even talking about? You've always favored Carol over me. And who do you think has been supporting you for the past few years? You had nowhere else to go, so I reluctantly let you stay with me," I fired back, my frustration boiling over. My parents were stunned into silence by my strong response. Without waiting for them to say anything, I thought about what my decision meant, ready to set the boundaries that were long overdue. "Who treated me and Charlie like unwanted guests and kicked us out?" "You did, didn't you? Trying to kick out the original resident is shameless." My father's voice filled with desperation. He said, "Please, Lisa, help us. We're sorry." But I had had enough. "I don't care. Figure it out yourselves," I said firmly. With that, I ended the call abruptly and blocked all contact with my family. Charlie, my loyal friend, looked up at me with concern. I hugged him tightly and whispered, "I'm sorry, Charlie, for shouting. Everything will be okay now. I'll protect you." I felt relieved that I had saved Charlie from a family that mistreated him. In the days that followed, I heard that my parents and sister had to leave the house at the last minute, despite trying desperately to hold on to it. With my father's low income and my unemployed mother and sister, they couldn't keep up a decent life. There were rumors that my parents pressured my sister to find a job, and their relationships worsened every day. I wasn't interested in their situation, but it was clear their lives had gotten worse since I left. It felt like they were facing the consequences of their actions, and I couldn't help but feel a bit vindicated. Meanwhile, I was living happily in my new apartment where pets were welcome. I could work as I pleased without complaints, and all my earnings were for me and Charlie. I was genuinely happy with my life. "Charlie, let's go to the dog park today," I said with a smile. Charlie seemed happier too, maybe because that noisy family wasn't part of our lives anymore. From then on, I was determined to protect Charlie and live a peaceful and happy life together. "Hey, where are you right now?" "I'm not sure. Don't upset me. There's nothing belonging to us in the house." "What's happening?" "Well, I packed up all my things and left, okay." "I don't get it. Why would you leave?" "Well, we got divorced, so it's not odd for me to leave, right?" "Divorced? I'm the one who filed the divorce papers." "What?" "My name is Claire. I'm 35 years old and work in an office. I'm married to Evan, and we've been together for 5 years. Evan used to work at a company, but he quit his job 2 years ago to start his own business. Unfortunately, his business hasn't been doing well, and we've been struggling financially for the past 2 years. Luckily, I have a good income, so we're able to make ends meet. Our relationship as a couple is okay, not great, but not terrible either. However, I have a big problem with my mother-in-law and sister-in-law who live in my husband's family home. Every time I see them, they make fun of how I look and always find something to complain about. It really upsets me and makes me feel stressed out. My in-laws' house is only a 10-minute drive from our apartment, so my husband often wants to visit them. When we first got married, I went along with it to please my husband, but lately I've started to stand up for myself because their behavior has become too much to handle. Even when I try to stand up for myself, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law don't stop. They always find ways to ask me for money. "Hey Claire, I need $500 to buy a birthday present for a friend. Can you give it to me?" $500? What are you buying? "I'm planning to gift a trip, and I'll be going too." No, that sounds odd. It's like I'm footing the bill, and I can't afford to give $500. You're so tight-fisted, Claire. Are you a miser? Even though Even supports you. Excuse me? I'm the one supporting him. My husband hasn't contributed anything to our living expenses in the past year, and you, sister-in-law, should get a job. It's not okay to be unemployed at your age. Why does my mother-in-law accept my sister-in-law's unemployment? I wanted to say all of this, but my husband interrupted. "Hey Claire, I have a friend's birthday coming up. I want to buy a present, so could you give me $500? You really understand, Even. You're a good son. Then can I also get about $300? I need it for something." I wasn't sure. "It's okay, Claire. You should have about $300 in your wallet, right? Come on, give it to her quickly." My husband, maybe out of pride, made me give the money to my sister-in-law without hesitation. And then he started saying confusing things like, "Thanks to me, we can live this luxurious life." I couldn't understand why my husband was acting this way lately. During the car ride home, I confronted him. "Why do you act like this?" "I have my pride as the eldest son," he started saying even more confusing things. This led to a big argument. Once you give them money, they become bossy. What's wrong with making my own mother happy? We can't afford to live that lavishly, you know. Do you get it? You're not contributing anything to our living expenses. So what? We got a big bonus this summer. Don't rely on that. That money is for savings. Since then, my husband and I have been constantly fighting. How can he act so arrogantly when we're struggling financially? Why does he always have to be in a position of power over me? His flaws are becoming more and more apparent. I realized I didn't have to put up with things I didn't like just for him. So when he recently said, "We're going to my mom's," I responded, "You go by yourself." My husband tried to argue, saying, "What do you mean? It's normal for the wife to come too." But when I pointed out, "So you're abnormal because you don't come when we go to my parents' house," he got annoyed and said, "Do whatever you want," then went to his parents' house alone. A weekend without my mother-in-law and sister-in-law was such a relief. It felt so comfortable and nice. With some free time to myself, I focused on working towards my dream, and that dream is to buy my own home. I spent time researching online and ordering brochures. My dreams and aspirations were growing, and just thinking about my new house made me excited. As I looked at different furniture options online, I imagined carefully arranging them in my future home. Lost in these thoughts, time passed quickly, and before I knew it, evening had arrived and my husband was back. "Oh, welcome home." Oh, is he still upset? How childish. He should act more mature as a grown man. I wasn't trying to cater to my husband, so I continued making dinner without speaking to him. Then out of nowhere, my husband spoke up. "You've been quite bold lately, huh? Standing up to me and saying you don't want to see my mother and the others." Defying, we're equals in this relationship. Besides, your mother and the others always criticize me, so I don't want to visit your parents' house anymore. That's what I mean by being bold. Normally, wives are expected to obey their husbands. If you say I can't do that, you're talking about divorce, right? Divorce? Are you surprised that I wouldn't mind being divorced by you? But I'm really upset with you. I've already prepared my part of the paperwork, so it can be submitted anytime. I'll let it go this time, but if you defy me again, it'll be an instant divorce. Think about that. With that, my husband smirked and ordered, "I'm going to take a bath. Hurry up and make dinner." Once I confirmed he was in the bath, I couldn't help but feel relieved. Yes, now I can end things with that man whenever I want. I cooked dinner happily. From then on, I worked hard to save money. I was almost ready to make the down payment. It was difficult to contain my excitement and keep from smiling. But in front of my husband, I acted calm. Finally, I bought a house in my own name. All that's left is to get a divorce after the house is ready and leave the home I share with my husband. I started packing my belongings little by little without my husband noticing and sent them to my parents' house temporarily. I had told my parents everything, and they understood my situation. Finally, the house was finished. When my husband went to his parents' house as usual on the weekend, I moved all my things to my new home. The new house is very comfortable, and both the inside and outside are just as I imagined. As I enjoyed the pleasant scent of a new home all day, my husband called me that night. "Hey, where are you?" "Well, where do you think I am?" "Don't play games with me. There's nothing left in the house." "What's happening?" "Well, I packed up all my stuff and left." "What? I don't understand. Why would you do that?" "Well, since we're divorced now, it's not unusual for me to move out, is it?" "Huh? Divorced? I already filed the divorce papers." "What?" "We're not together anymore. Don't try to fool me. I won't accept that." "But you were the one who said we could get divorced whenever. As a businessman, you should stand by your words. Anyway, this is the end for us." With that, I hung up the phone. Finally, I was free from my husband. That night, I slept peacefully. Living in my new home was so comfortable, and every morning, I woke up feeling refreshed. Today, I decided to invite my parents over to my new home for the first time. As I was cooking alone in the kitchen, my parents arrived with a bottle of celebratory sake. They were both surprised and impressed by my new home, and then the three of us raised our glasses for a toast. Even though it was a bit early, we started celebrating. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Huh? Who could it be at this hour? When I checked the intercom, I saw my ex-husband, ex-mother-in-law, and ex-sister-in-law standing there. "Why are you here?" "From now on, my parents and I will be living here. My father is in the hospital right now, but when he's discharged, he'll also be living here. Please leave immediately." "No way, that's absurd." "Why should I do that?" "Please leave my property right now." Then my ex-mother-in-law stepped forward. "You cheeky girl, listen. What's yours is mine. If you understand, open the door." What are you talking about? I'm single now." "Huh? Didn't your son tell you?" "We've already filed for divorce. We're strangers now." Upon hearing this, my ex-mother-in-law and ex-sister-in-law looked at my ex-husband. He seemed to be explaining something to them, although I couldn't see clearly on the intercom screen. He was probably saying something like, "I don't accept this." I told them, "Anyway, you can't enter this house. Please leave," and hung up the intercom. As my ex-husband continued shouting at the front door, demanding to talk, I was at a loss for what to do to make him leave. Then, to my surprise, a police car pulled up in front of my house, and they took my ex-husband into custody. From inside, I could hear my ex-husband protesting and struggling as the police pinned him to the ground. "It hurts. Why is this happening to me?" Meanwhile, my ex-mother-in-law and ex-sister-in-law stood there in shock upon learning that their son was divorced. They weren't arrested, but they were escorted away in the police car. After watching my ex-husband and his family being taken away, I returned inside the house, wondering who had called the cops. Then, to my surprise, my father made a peace sign. In situations like this, you call the police immediately. Trust your always calm dad. We continued our party with another round of drinks. As for how my ex-husband found out where I live, it turns out he followed me home from work because he admitted to stalking me. If he shows up again, he'll be arrested on the spot. With his timid personality, it's unlikely that he'll come near this house again. I also obtained a restraining order against his family. After the incident, it seems my ex-husband's business went downhill, and he accrued a lot of debt. With the divorce, the financial support he and his family were relying on from me was cut off. Additionally, with his father in the hospital, they had no source of income, so they had to sell their house. It's a case of reaping what they sowed. On the other hand, I invited my parents to live with me in my new home. They're very happy, calling me incredibly filial, and they're enjoying life in our new home. I want to continue cherishing my parents and live happily as a close-knit family. With his timid personality, it's unlikely that he'll come near this house again. I also obtained a restraining order against his family. After the incident, it seems my ex-husband's business went downhill, and he accrued a lot of debt. With the divorce, the financial support he and his family were relying on from me was cut off. Additionally, with his father in the hospital, they had no source of income, so they had to sell their house. It's a case of reaping what they sowed. On the other hand, I invited my parents to live with me in my new home. They're very happy, calling me incredibly filial, and they're enjoying life in our new home. I want to continue cherishing my parents and live happily as a close-knit family. So they're saying I grew up with just my mom, huh? That must have been really tough. They're saying our home wasn't good enough for their son to marry into. Right now, I'm sitting here with my fiance's parents, and they're saying some really mean things to me. They're not just making fun of me, they're making fun of my mom too. They're a terrible family. I'm not going to agree to marry their son. I'll show them what it feels like and say no to their proposal. They deserve to feel really bad about how they're acting. My name is Emma, and I'm 27 years old. It's just me and my mom in our family. My dad died in an accident when I was little, leaving us alone. When my dad passed away, my mom didn't cry. She always smiled, even though I was crying a lot. My mom worked really hard so I could go to university and study law. Now I work for a big company and stay really busy. My fiancé, Michael, is 30 years old, 3 years older than me. He asked me to marry him after we'd been together for a year and a half. He asked me out after we met at work, and I said yes because I wanted to make my mom happy, even though I thought it might be too soon. Today we're going to meet his parents to talk about our wedding. I'm so nervous. Do I look okay? Don't worry, Emma. You always stress too much. But Michael, you mentioned your parents are quite important. They're considered wealthy. It's more about my granddad, though. He was quite successful. Yeah, his folks are what you call rich. His granddad did well as a business person and left a lot of money when he died. It seems like his dad is living off that money. Do you think they'll be okay with it? I picked this gift from a fancy store, but do you think they'll appreciate it? It's okay, it's okay. What matters is that we brought a gift. Gosh, I'm really anxious, you know. He's just going back to his parents' house. So he's calmer than me. I'm so nervous, it feels like my heart might leap out of my mouth. Try to be a bit more serious. This is a formal meeting to tell them about our wedding. As I started to get annoyed by his relaxed attitude, I saw a huge mansion that took my breath away. It's huge, just like I thought. When I quietly said that, he chuckled proudly. Granddad was quite something. Dad and everyone else are waiting. Let's go in fast. As we stepped into the entrance together, the big door opened by itself and his parents welcomed us. Hello, you're Emma, right? Our son has told us about you. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Michael's mother. Yes, nice to meet you. I'm Emma. You're so sweet. Please come in. I'll prepare some tea. His mom was calm and smiling the whole time, which helped me relax a bit. His dad was also friendly. So you work with Michael, huh, Emma? That's impressive. A woman working at that company. Thank you. The term a woman bothered me a bit, but I took it as a compliment and replied politely. However, as the conversation went on, I started to feel more and more uncomfortable. Well, deciding to marry Michael takes courage, Emma. Huh? What do you mean? Michael's parents, in other words, us, were wealthy. Normally, someone might feel intimidated by the difference in status and be hesitant about marriage, you know. Yeah, some people might feel that way. Michael's dad seemed to think they were quite special and didn't hesitate to talk about their status. Michael's mom, who had been calm before, started to show her true colors as the conversation went on. Well, my family wasn't really rich, but as you can see, and pardon me for saying this, I'm quite attractive. Don't you think I'm a good match for my husband? Oh, I see, Emma. You're remarkable for agreeing to marry Michael with your looks. I couldn't do it. I couldn't tell if she was being sarcastic or sincere. I looked at Michael for help, but he didn't seem to care. In fact, he even joined in and started teasing me with his parents. Emma, she's not the most beautiful, but she's good at her job. I think she'll make a good wife. She's highly respected at work, even though she's a woman. I believe she can keep up with me, right? Was he always like this? When it was just the two of us, he seemed more composed. Maybe he acts different around his parents. While I wondered about this, I managed to keep up a polite smile. Suddenly, Michael's dad asked him, "Oh, Michael, have you met her parents yet?" Of course, I've already handled that, so no need to worry. I assume Emma's parents are pretty ordinary. She doesn't have a dad, but her mom seems like any other mom. After Michael's response, his dad's eyebrows twitched. "No dad, Emma. What's the story there?" Taken aback by the sudden change in Michael's dad, I quickly explained. "My dad died in an accident when I was little, so my mom raised me on her own." "So you grew up in a single-parent household?" "Yeah, that's right. I still live with my mom." When I finished explaining, Michael's dad looked deeply thoughtful, and his mom seemed to get upset. They started whispering as if they were having a private conversation. Is everything okay?" I asked cautiously, confused by their reactions. At the same time, Michael's mom said something surprising. "This could be a problem." What do you mean?" "Michael, maybe you should think again about marrying her. Mom will find you a girl from a better background." "Wait, what are you saying?" Michael's mother gave me a cold stare. "A girl raised by a single mother isn't suitable for Michael, is she?" Right beside her, Michael's father quickly added, "Exactly, Michael. Despite her career success, coming from a single-parent household is a problem, isn't it? I've warned you many times to be cautious about who you marry, but you—" It felt like I was being judged like a faulty item. Hearing such words from my fiance's parents, whom I was meeting for the first time, was completely unexpected. I was left stunned in shock. Then my fiancé, Michael, said something that made me question if I heard correctly. "Oh, so she's not even close to meeting the standards. I thought she might barely make it. But I'm already 30 and finding someone else would be a hassle, so I'll just settle for Emma." "What? Michael, don't we want to get married because we love each other? You didn't really think I was marrying for love, did you?" He laughed loudly, tossing out those harsh words. "All I want is a wife who can manage the house like a maid. I can't truly love someone with a family background like yours." "That's right," Michael's mom chimed in, agreeing with his cold words. Even Michael's dad nodded along, laughing mockingly. I can't believe this. I thought he was the one who genuinely wanted to marry me out of love. I was completely speechless at this sudden turn of events. As I struggled to find words, Michael's parents continued their verbal assault. "Single mother household. It's audacious of you to even consider marrying my son when you come from such a disgraceful background." "Absolutely not. Our son cannot marry a girl brought up in such a low-class environment." In that moment, all the emotions I had been suppressing reached their breaking point. Instead of shock, I felt a surge of anger at the insults directed towards my life and my beloved mother. I couldn't contain it any longer. Slowly, I raised my head and calmly addressed them. "Fine. Let's cancel the wedding, and I request that you leave immediately." Not only were Michael's parents shocked by my statement, but even he seemed taken aback. He asked me in confusion, "Emma, what are you suddenly saying? Are you asking me to leave? Don't you understand? Why are you saying this? I don't get it." In response, Michael's parents started causing a scene. "Exactly. We don't have to take orders from someone like you, Emma. Your family background is poor, and your attitude is terrible. What do you think you're doing? Be quiet." I slammed my hand on the desk and stood up. "Do you know who owns the land this house is on?" "What are you talking about? This land was inherited from my father." "From your father? Can you prove that this land is yours? Do you have any evidence?" When asked for proof, Michael's father started to panic. They seemed to have never checked, whispering to each other. "What's the problem? If you own the land, there should be proof, right? Like inheritance documents. We don't have anything like that. This house was built by my father, and this land belonged to him from the beginning. That's how he could build it." As Michael's father spoke, Michael's mother also chimed in. "First of all, what are you talking about, Emma? It's impolite for someone like you to discuss someone else's property. Stop it. Just because my parents didn't approve of our marriage, don't start making baseless accusations. It's pointless to keep going like this." I decided to reveal the truth. "It seems you're unaware, so I'll explain. Your grandfather only had a lease agreement with my grandfather." "What? A lease agreement?" It seemed like a new term for him, and Michael's father looked confused. I was frustrated and explained it patiently so even this ignorant family could grasp it. "A lease agreement means you're allowed to use the land. Right now, you're using it for free, but when the agreement ends, it goes back to us. So basically, your grandfather is just borrowing this land temporarily from mine. No, that can't be. I've never heard of such a thing. You're lying. Are you calling me a liar? That's not true, and we have the contract to prove it. We've already checked its validity. Michael's father was stunned and flustered by this unexpected truth. No, it can't be true. You're just making it up. You come from a single-parent family and your dad passed away. That doesn't matter. My mom's dad owned a lot of land and lent it to many people. We've been able to live thanks to his support. You own that much land? Yeah, I studied law in college, so my mom and I were looking into our land leases. That's when we found out that this place where you live is also owned by my grandfather. Do you get it now? The three of them were shocked and speechless. They were struggling to understand their situation, but I explained it anyway. Considering this, could you please leave this land soon? According to the contract, the free rental period ended a while ago. I believe my mom sent you a notice beforehand. A notice? No, we never got anything right, Mom. Michael's father looked to his mom for confirmation, but she replied with a pale face. I did notice an envelope coming every month, but I didn't really understand what it was for, so I thought it was junk mail and threw it away. Could that be it? That was the notice, I said with a smile. We've been sending notices for over 2 years now. What will you do? Pay 2 years' worth of land rent or leave? You need to decide. Wait, hold on. You can't just spring this on us out of nowhere. Out of nowhere? We've been asking you to do something for a while now. Please, make a decision, Michael's father begged desperately, kneeling down. We've been facing huge losses in the stock market recently, and our assets are minimal. We were counting on Michael's support from now on. But there was no room for leniency anymore. I had planned to settle things amicably if the marriage was decided and if I received an apology about the notices. But since you've insulted my mother, I've had enough. I'm sorry, but I can't let you continue to stay on this land for free. With that refusal, Michael's parents started to tremble. Even Michael, who had been calm until then, began to change his attitude as if it were the right moment. Hey, Emma, can't you stop this now? I'm going to marry you, so please. What are you saying now? So what? Let's just forget about this. If we get married, there won't be any issues with the land, right? Right? Is this guy for real? I can't imagine marrying someone so disrespectful. At this point, I don't meet a man who insults his fiancée alongside his parents. I'm sorry, but I have to decline. I refuse to become part of a family with such a conceited man like you and your knave parents. At my words, he looked like he was on the verge of tears. Please forgive me. What happened next doesn't need much explanation. Despite boasting about their wealth, his parents were actually struggling financially. They couldn't even afford to pay the land tax for 2 years upfront, revealing their true financial situation. Eventually, they had to leave their land, sell their grandfather's pride and joy, the house, to cover the overdue taxes. They tried to maintain their lifestyle for a while, but it seems their money dried up quickly. Now they're living in a small apartment as a family of 3. Word about the whole ordeal spread quickly within the company, and he lost his reputation. However, his parents rely on his income, so it seems he's stuck. Sometimes I receive romantic emails from him, but I never reply. I have no feelings for him whatsoever, and I doubt I'll ever trust him again. He's become the subject of gossip at the company, and I secretly hope he continues to struggle in his tough situation. My husband surprised me by saying I should go back to my parents' house because my parents are already living in our house. I felt shocked by his sudden words, but he seemed to think he was being reasonable. He said, "Do you have a problem with that? Don't argue with me. I'm fine with divorcing you if you do." Lately he had been distant and unkind, and I had my own complaints. I had been thinking about divorcing him too, but I didn't think it was fair for him to kick me out of our home. I thought to myself, I'm the one paying $1,800 for our expenses. Does he even remember that? As I looked at him in shock, he got angry and said, "Leave this house now. My parents won't feel good if you're here." I didn't really get why I had to go, but I said, "Okay, I'll take all my stuff with me." Once I agreed, he seemed happy and said, "Then do it," and walked away. Right away, I called a shop to sell my things. My name's Emily, and I live with my husband, Robert, who's 5 years older than me. We met through mutual friends, and our first hangout turned into spending the whole day together. Robert mentioned he wanted to be a voice actor, and I was impressed by his deep voice. I've always liked soothing voices, so I felt drawn to him. It seemed like he felt the same because we exchanged numbers and decided to hang out more. Before we knew it, we were dating, even though we never really talked about it. I had just graduated from college and started working, so dating someone more mature seemed exciting. My friend Ashley was worried about the 5-year age gap, but I reassured her that it wasn't a big deal. I liked Robert a lot, and he felt the same about me, so I wasn't concerned. Eventually, Ashley agreed, trusting my judgment. Robert and I dated for about 3 years, and then he brought up the idea of getting married. I had already told my parents about him and his age, so they were excited to meet him. With their expectations in mind, I often wondered when he would propose. He ended up proposing during one of his usual visits to my apartment, where we just hang out and relax. It wasn't the most romantic setting, but it felt like something Robert would do, and I was okay with that. When he asked, I simply said, "Sure, let's get married." So maybe we were both a little casual about it. After that, we visited each other's parents, but I didn't really connect with Robert's parents. When we went to Robert's family home, it was filled with what looked like old-fashioned items, but they seemed to be fake. When we met Robert's parents, they were wearing expensive clothes and lots of flashy jewelry. They seemed like they were trying too hard to look rich. Our tastes and values were very different, and I didn't think we would get along. Robert's mom even made a rude comment about my appearance, which hurt my feelings. I was surprised that the parents of the man I wanted to marry acted like this. But in the end, it's Robert and I who are getting married. If I don't like his parents, I don't have to spend much time with them. So I decided not to let it bother me too much. After we got married and moved into our condo, Robert seemed worried about something. "Hey, who was that woman in the blue dress at our wedding?" "Which woman in a blue dress?" There were a few guests at our wedding who wore blue, so I couldn't figure out who he was talking about based on that alone. "You know, the one who gave a speech as your best friend." "Are you talking about Ashley?" "Yes, she was wearing a blue dress." When Robert said this, he seemed a bit uneasy. "What's wrong with Ashley?" I asked, confused by his reaction. "Oh, it's not a big deal. The other day, I thought I saw someone who looked like her when I was going to work. That's when I remembered she gave a speech as your best friend at the wedding." I was confused by Robert's sudden interest in Ashley and his flustered demeanor, but he just laughed it off and went to his room before I could ask more. A little while later, Ashley called me with some news. "Listen, Emily, my boyfriend's coming back to the US next year." Ashley had been dating her boyfriend since high school. They'd known each other since elementary school, but he moved away in middle school. They kept in touch through letters and finally reunited in high school when he confessed his feelings for her. I always loved hearing Ashley's love stories. Despite her boyfriend being away working at an international branch for a few years, they stayed close and communicated regularly. "Do you think he might propose once he's back, and then you guys will get married?" "Oh, Emily, you're always jumping to conclusions. Just make sure to invite me to the wedding. I promise I'll give a heartfelt speech." "Of course. After the beautiful speech you gave at your wedding, I'll definitely need you to do the same for mine." Don't set the bar too high. We chuckled together as we sipped our tea. Our conversations flowed easily, and we trusted each other completely. Whenever one of us had a problem, the other was always there, ready to lend a listening ear. Around this time, I began to notice that Robert was coming home later and later. "Working late again today?" "Yeah, you think I shouldn't work or something." Even after we got married, Robert held onto his dream of becoming a voice actor. He was working hard to pursue his passion, but it meant he had to take on part-time jobs to make ends meet. Unfortunately, all the money he earned from those jobs went straight into his voice acting classes, so I had to cover all our living expenses. This meant we couldn't really save up together. As time went on, I realized that Robert wasn't willing to give up on his dream for the sake of our family. I started to worry about how much overtime Robert was putting in at his part-time job. It added to my concerns about our financial situation. "Hey, haven't you been working too much lately? They shouldn't be making you do so much overtime, even if it's just a part-time job." "I told you I'm fine. More money is always better. Just keep your opinions to yourself." By then, Robert had stopped using my name and just called me you. When we got married, I thought he would speak to me kindly and more often, But it seemed like harsh words were all I heard from him. His once gentle voice had turned rough, and he started drinking a lot. Sometimes his voice even sounded hoarse, which worried me because voice acting requires a healthy throat. But it seemed like he didn't want to hear about it. He started avoiding talking to me, and eventually he would ignore me even when we were in the same room. That's when Ashley called me. She said she had something important to discuss. So I suggested we meet up since I had my own worries. We decided to meet at a karaoke booth so we could talk privately. Ashley seemed really cautious and picked a room where she could see the counter and staff from the door. You chose this room specifically? Yes, I wanted a spot where the staff could see if there was a suspicious person outside our door. A suspicious person? Is that related to what you wanted to discuss? Ashley nodded in response to my question. She had been feeling like someone was following her ever since she left her job about a month ago. Now, she even felt followed on her days off. The reason she chose a room where the staff could easily see was that she thought the person stalking her might try to eavesdrop on our conversation. Did you talk to the police about it? I tried, but since there's no actual contact, they can't do much. What about your boyfriend? He's coming back in a month. I thought I'd discuss it with him too, but I wanted to first talk to you, someone close by. I see. Ashley hadn't gotten a good look at her stalker because she was too scared, so she didn't know if it was a man or a woman. I decided to keep an eye out from a distance to identify the person stalking her, and through that, I came to understand who it was. Though I couldn't bring myself to discuss my troubled relationship with Robert, looking back, maybe it was for the best, because the one following my best friend Ashley was none other than my husband Robert. He would claim he had to work late every day, but after his shift, he would hang around near Ashley's workplace and follow her when she left. I couldn't believe that the person scaring Ashley was someone so close to me. When I found out, I was shocked, and the expression on Robert's face as he followed Ashley was chilling. He had this creepy, unsettling grin. I fell in love with and married this man, but the moment I saw his true face, the love I thought would last forever turned cold. I told Ashley the truth and urged her to move right away. With the help of her colleagues, she arranged for someone to drive her from the underground parking lot to her new place for a while. After we took these precautions, Robert's frustration grew, and one day, it boiled over. My parents are going to live here, so you need to go back to your parents' house. I was shocked by Robert's sudden demand, but he seemed convinced he was being reasonable. If you have a problem with that, then I'm fine with divorcing you, he said, starting to lose his temper. Even though I had my own issues with him and had considered divorce, I didn't think he could just kick me out of our home. I'm the one paying $1,800 for our monthly expenses. I wonder if Robert even remembers that. When I gave him a skeptical look, he got angry. Just leave already. My parents can't move in if you're still here. Why do I have to leave? I don't understand at all. But I said, okay, I'll take everything I bought with me. Seeing me agree, Robert just told me to hurry up and walked away. I immediately contacted a local buyback service. The next day, they came to our apartment. At first, Robert smirked, thinking I was leaving. But when he saw the workers assessing all our furniture and appliances, his eyes widened in shock. After the evaluation was done, except for what was in Robert's room, a staff member handed me a quote, saying, "The total value is $22,000. I quickly signed, saying, "Okay, sell it all." Suddenly, Robert snapped back to reality and grabbed my arm. "Why are you selling everything? My parents are going to live here. How can they if there's no furniture?" I shook off his grip. "What do you mean? When we got married, you told me you were broke because you were paying for your acting classes. You asked me to handle the rent, furniture, and living expenses. I never knew you were that broke. I feel deceived. Remember the $1,800 I've been covering every month? From now on, you'll pay that. And with your parents moving in, I bet it'll be even more." Robert went pale, but he quickly tried to regain his composure. "You thought talking about money would make me cancel the divorce? Who do you think you are?" "I've already gotten close to a rich lady," he said, striking a pose. But then I remembered Robert following Ashley recently. If what he considered getting close was his stalking behavior, then he was seriously deluded. Ashley came from a wealthy family. Her grandfather was a businessman, and now her father had taken over. Ashley truly was the perfect heiress, but she didn't flaunt it. She spent money like me and our friends, and no one judged her based on her family's wealth. However, Robert seemed to have found out about Ashley's wealthy background and decided she'd be a better match. Could he possibly think that if two people are the same age, the wealthier one is better? That infuriated me. But Ashley would never marry Robert. Her high school boyfriend, whom she'd been dating for years, was coming back to the States soon. They would likely get married. I mentioned how Ashley felt really creeped out because someone had been stalking her every day. When Robert heard that Ashley found him creepy and that they weren't close, he was shocked. "I always walked Ashley home," he said. "You're lucky I didn't call the police," I replied. "But I didn't know she had a boyfriend. He's been away. She'd pick me over someone she doesn't know." They've been writing letters since they were kids and talk almost every day. And unlike you, who's only had part-time jobs, her boyfriend is successful. Even her dad likes him. Robert looked really sad when I said all that. But when the people came to take away our stuff, he seemed to feel better. "I guess you're all I've got now. You'll always support my dream of being a voice actor, won't you?" he asked, trying to look cool. I gave him a cold stare and said sorry. "I've already started divorce proceedings. Let's talk through our lawyers from now on." Robert, maybe thinking I still liked him, held on to me. "Don't say that. Haven't we been getting along all this time?" "Getting along? When? Since you found out my best friend Ashley is rich, you've been distant and hanging out with her." "Right after we got married, I realized I made a mistake." Robert started crying, even though he's older than me. Seeing him cry like a kid made me like him even less. I couldn't stand being near him anymore. "Stop it." "Oh, I also told your uncle we're getting divorced." "Your uncle? You know he's tough, right?" "Well, I've been paying all the rent and bills until now. When I told your uncle I might leave, he said he'd make you work for him. That means I can't keep studying voice acting. You hardly practice anyway. Maybe it's time to face reality. And if you go near Ashley again, I'll call the police. Goodbye." I left, determined not to turn back. For now, I'll stay with my parents, but I might move closer to work if I find a good place. As for Robert, his uncle made him work at his company just like he said he would. Then Robert's parents, who were planning to live off him after he married Ashley, also moved in. They all ended up working for the uncle. It seems like taking advantage of people runs in their family. I'm just glad I got away from that toxic situation. Age doesn't matter much, but I'll be more careful choosing my next partner. On a brighter note, after things settled with Robert, Ashley invited me to her wedding. She introduced me to her long-term boyfriend, and I truly wish them happiness. My marriage didn't work out, but I hope Ashley's lasts a long time. My mom's cooking is way better than yours. While some leaned back on the dining chairs and others sat up straight, the four of us gathered around a table full of delicious dishes. Normally, we wouldn't have such a fancy meal, but today we were eating with my in-laws. Keith, smirking even while eating, looked at me and said, "But I made that dish. Your usual bad cook." I responded to Keith's comment and then glanced at my parents-in-law to see their reactions. "What did you say?" My parents-in-law looked confused. The atmosphere grew tense. For a moment, it felt like time stopped, and everyone just sat there, unable to move or speak with their forks in their hands. I thought it was time to stop hiding my feelings. I didn't want to keep up my relationships with Keith and his parents while secretly feeling so unhappy. I was ready to fight back. I had planned my revenge on Keith for a long time, and today was the day. That's why I left our daughter, Naomi, with my parents. I didn't want her to see this ugly side of things or get upset by the conversation. I was determined to reach my goal and felt secretly pleased about it. My name is Rachel Davis. I'm 34 years old, and my daughter, Naomi, just started elementary school. I'm a typical housewife, living a comfortable life. Even though I call myself typical, I married into a wealthy family so I can enjoy some luxury. However, I wasn't overly greedy. All I wanted was to be happy with my husband, Keith. Most people would think we have a happy life, but there was one thing that troubled me. Keith, who is 39 this year, had been coming home late more often recently. He's always had late nights since we got married because he works at a big company and has a lot of responsibilities. I figured his job kept him busy, so I didn't complain. Plus, on his days off, Keith would spend time with Naomi and sometimes take us on family trips. Keith had never complained since we got married. Even though he often felt stressed from work, he always tried his best. I thought it wouldn't be fair to suspect him of something like infidelity. In many families, stress and complaints can lead to arguments, but that wasn't the case for us. Keith didn't have bad habits like drinking too much or being mean. He was quite respectable. Sometimes I admired him, thinking that people from good families tend to have good manners. However, something changed this year. Sometimes he would respond to me in a distant way, even when I talked about ordinary things. Recently, he started spending more time on his smartphone, and our conversations became less frequent. I thought it might be due to work, so I didn't question him about it. One weekday evening, our daughter Naomi came home from elementary school and said, "Daddy was with someone I don't know." Upon hearing Naomi's statement, I stopped slicing vegetables in the kitchen. "What do you mean?" I hadn't planned on asking Naomi about such things, but with Keith's recent strange behavior, doubts had started creeping in. I was curious, so I gently probed for more information from Naomi. "What did this person look like? Was it a woman?" "I don't know," Naomi replied. "Okay, how old did she seem to be?" "Probably around your age, Mom." "All right, thanks." With that limited information, I couldn't be sure if Keith was cheating. Given his high position, it could have been work-related, but something felt off. Troubled by this uneasy feeling, I decided to go somewhere specific the next day. "I'm sorry for bringing this up suddenly," I apologized. "No, it's okay. I understand the situation with your husband now. What exactly would you like me to look into?" Timothy asked. Lost in my thoughts while sitting on the couch, I watched as Timothy spread out some documents on the glass table in front of me. "We have a plan where we can take photos for evidence or have our staff interact closely with your husband to gather information, and then," Timothy explained the details carefully. "I think I'd like to go with this option," I said, pointing to the plan outlined in the documents, nodding in agreement. "I'm currently in the city, having visited a detective agency located in a back alley not far from downtown. Across from me sits Timothy Rogers, dressed in a black suit, the detective assigned to my case. Since yesterday, I've been plagued by a persistent suspicion that Keith might be cheating on me. Reluctantly, I turned to a professional detective. Doubting my husband, with whom I shared my life for several years, wasn't something I could easily discuss with anyone else. Yet the need to uncover the truth outweighed my reservations, and I recounted the events leading up to our meeting. "So, what kind of work does your husband usually do?" Timothy inquired. "He's in a managerial role in sales at a major corporation. Like a department head or something?" "Yes, something along those lines. But right now, I prefer not to disclose the company's name. Is that all right? I wanted to keep things low-key and avoid involving people who weren't directly connected to what was happening between Keith and me." "I understand. Depending on how things progress, we may need that information, but for now," Timothy paused to clarify. "Just to confirm, does your husband typically work at the company's main office or at a sales branch?" "I believe it's the sales branch," I replied, trying to recall. "Got it. If he's based at the company, knowing the name would help. I can tell you, but only if you promise not to share it with anyone." Timothy looked a bit nervous as he handed me a pen, and I quickly wrote down the name on the notepad he had placed on the table. "This company is pretty big, or rather well known?" "Yes, exactly. That's why I didn't want to mention it. Can you please keep it confidential?" "Absolutely. We don't want to cause any trouble for the company. This is strictly about your personal situation." Timothy nodded solemnly, took a deep breath, and continued our discussion. 2 weeks passed since then. I returned to the detective agency and met with Timothy again. "I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but your husband is indeed cheating." "Oh, I see." I widened my eyes in surprise, and at the same time, I sighed as if resigning myself to the truth. I was hurting inside. What had been a small suspicion had now become a painful reality, yet I felt a sense of duty to face it. It was this mix of emotions that kept me outwardly composed. "What's the next step? Should we continue the investigation further?" "Yes, please. That would mean getting more deeply involved." "Are you sure about that?" Timothy asked cautiously. "Yes," I replied firmly. Even though my heart felt heavy, I was determined to uncover the truth, so I nodded slowly. "So the affair is confirmed now?" I asked, needing confirmation. "Yes, unfortunately. There were times when your husband was living with the woman he had the affair with," Timothy replied somberly. "I see. So those times he didn't come home late because of work, but to be with his mistress." Knowing this made anger surge within me. I admitted bitterly. Do you want to see the photographic evidence now, or would you prefer to see it later? You can also choose not to see it, Timothy offered carefully. Show it to me, I said firmly, despite the turmoil inside me. Are you sure? He asked, concerned. Yes, please show it to me, I replied with a trembling voice. Timothy retrieved a photo from a brown envelope and handed it to me. As I looked at it, I saw Keith entering his mistress's house. Naomi hadn't been mistaken. The woman appeared to be around my age, but slightly younger and attractive. Keith seemed happier with her than with me. Naomi was only in first grade, and the thought of divorce pained me, but I couldn't bear to stay with a cheating husband. If this affair harmed Naomi in any way, I knew I had to act now. I looked at the photo again, suppressing my hurt, and made my decision. I need as much information as possible, I said firmly. All right then, we'll conduct an investigation over the next 2 months. Is that acceptable to you? Timothy asked. Yes, I have the funds for it. Please proceed, I replied, meeting Timothy's gaze. Hey, don't be saying such things. All you're doing is lying, came a voice. No, it's the truth. I am now at Keith's parents' house with Naomi not present, allowing me to respond fully to Keith's statements. I have not lied or deceived my parents-in-law. What's wrong with telling the truth? And there's no benefit for me in lying, I assert. A few days ago, Timothy completed his investigation and handed me a report, which I now have in a bag beside me. With this evidence, Keith won't be able to deny his actions, and once it's presented, his parents should understand. However, I need to approach this carefully, knowing Keith is capable of deceiving even those closest to him. I plan to reveal the truth to his parents while carefully observing the situation. You're crazy. My son would never cheat. You're just making up lies like Keith said. It's rude to accuse him falsely, Robert's voice boomed from inside the room. Moments ago, we were all chatting pleasantly, but a small disagreement between Keith and me had quickly turned the atmosphere tense. I had simply mentioned that Keith had been coming home late for the past 6 months, but he immediately became defensive and accused me of lying. I knew I had provoked this, but my resentment towards him ran deep. I had come to this gathering with a sense of needing to confront him. Keith said you can't even handle basic household chores properly. You're just sitting at home, doing nothing, Robert continued, his voice sharp. That's a misunderstanding, I replied firmly. A misunderstanding? Are you calling my son a liar? Yes, I affirmed, keeping my composure despite Robert's intimidating stare. That's absurd. My son is exceptional. I've given him the best education and upbringing. I taught him respect and responsibility. He wouldn't do something like cheat, Robert insisted adamantly. Robert's refusal to accept Keith's actions stemmed from his ignorance of the truth. His demeanor grew more tense by the moment. I was poised to present the evidence and reached for my bag. I used to trust you, but not anymore after this, Susan interjected with disappointment in her voice. Susan had always been kind. When I arrived early at their home today, she greeted me warmly. It was Susan who had initially encouraged Keith to marry me, owing to our mother's long-standing friendship. Yet now, Susan regarded me with suspicion, as if I were a criminal. If things are this bad, we might have to consider divorce, Susan sighed, her words heavy with resignation. I hadn't wanted divorce to be mentioned. Our family runs a prominent company. If people find out that someone like you is married to my son, especially since Keith is set to become CEO in about 10 years, it will reflect poorly on us. Susan continued, her tone direct but her expression apologetic. Plus, she can't even cook properly and is cheating. That's not true. I cook just fine. I defended myself. Really? Your cooking tastes awful, Susan retorted. In that room, where tension hung thick, Keith casually picked up his fork, took a piece of grilled fish from the table, and started eating. His arrogant demeanor grated on my nerves. You know, Mom's cooking is way better than yours, Keith remarked with a laugh. What? That was made by me though, wasn't it? Your usual mistress whose cooking is awful, I muttered in stunned disbelief at Keith's remark. The atmosphere in the room turned tense instantly. Excuse me. Both sets of parents-in-law looked shocked, mouths hanging open. Keith's eyes widened as he dropped the grilled fish he had picked up with his fork onto the table. What are you saying? Susan's voice quivered with surprise. Just what I said, I replied calmly to Susan's question. As I've been saying, the one lying here is my husband. Stop making up stories, Keith slammed his fork down, his voice rising. It's not true. Besides, I cooked that grilled fish this morning when I arrived, not your mother. You and your father wouldn't know since you came later in the afternoon, I explained, maintaining my composure. Keith's irritation grew, and his face flushed red with anger. You have evidence? Keith challenged, standing up from his seat. Yes, I do. I'll show you, I asserted firmly. What? No, you're lying. This is nonsense. Keith protested vehemently. It's true. I'm serious, I asserted firmly, meeting Keith's eyes with an unusually serious expression. Well, anyway, I haven't done anything wrong, Keith muttered, sitting back down quietly. You understand the consequences if this turns out to be true, right? Robert's voice rang out angrily. Let's calm down first. Does Rachel really have evidence? Susan interjected, trying to diffuse the escalating tension. In that moment, Susan was the voice of reason. I retrieved an envelope from my bag and placed photos, along with a letter-sized paper from Timothy, the detective, on the table. Keith's face paled as he watched me lay out the evidence. No, this isn't what it looks like, Keith protested desperately, refusing to face the truth. What's going on? What does all of this mean? Robert demanded, but Keith covered his ears in a futile attempt to block out the truth. What are these? These photos? Who is this person? Are you really cheating? Robert demanded, shocked and dismayed. Yes, that's correct. That's why I had these photos taken as evidence. This is not fabricated. I've also spoken with a lawyer, so if we decide to divorce, it will be handled legally, I stated firmly, my resolve unwavering. I was determined to hold Keith accountable. This could damage the reputation of my company. Robert's voice wavered. The confidence he had shown earlier seemed to fade away. What's the truth here? This isn't my fault, Keith muttered defensively. At Susan's question, Keith covered his face with both hands, unwilling to confront the reality before him. However, he couldn't deny the undeniable evidence any longer. Keith's distressed expression slowly gave way, and it became clear he was starting to regain his composure. All right, I'll talk, Keith slumped, appearing exhausted. He struggled to find the right words. I did cheat, but it's not entirely my fault. Keith began to justify himself from the beginning. I had someone I loved before, Keith admitted. Loved. I was taken aback. Keith had never mentioned this before. Since when? I pressed. Before I met you, before Mom introduced you to me, Keith confessed. So why did you choose to marry me then? I asked, feeling a mix of hurt and confusion. Because it looked good socially, Keith admitted reluctantly. Then he turned to his parents, his expression troubled. What do you mean by that? I asked, trying to comprehend Keith's explanation. Dad wanted me to get married soon, so I was set up with someone Mom recommended, Keith explained, his voice strained. So if you love someone else, why didn't you tell me? I questioned, feeling hurt and betrayed. Because I knew you would criticize me, Keith admitted reluctantly. Who is this person you love? Robert demanded angrily. The suspicion he had harbored towards me now shifted to Keith, and he banged the table with his right hand, demanding the full story. It was someone I met about 10 years ago. She worked at a nightlife spot, but given that my father runs a major company, I couldn't openly discuss it, Keith confessed, his tone resigned. A nightlife spot? Well, in that case, I probably would have opposed the marriage, Robert muttered with frustration and disappointment. Indeed, Keith admitted. Yes, Dad, so it's not entirely my fault. In truth, I wanted to marry her. Keith dropped a bombshell, revealing the truth I had never known. I was left speechless. We had lived together for years, had a child together, but Keith had never truly loved me. It was a devastating realization. She said it would be okay if we got married this year, so I saw it as my chance, Keith continued, explaining himself. Chance? Chance for what? What are you talking about? Susan, who had been listening intently, interjected with confusion. It was my last opportunity to marry her, and I thought if I spoke poorly of Rachel, Dad and Mom would agree to our divorce, Keith confessed bitterly. I'm tired of all of it, the societal pressures and expectations. I just want a simple life. I'd rather spend my life with that woman than with our family. Keith spoke with a raw honesty I had never heard from him before. Despite my hurt, I felt a twinge of sympathy, realizing the stress he had been under all these years. But it also became clear that our relationship had only been a facade, lacking any genuine love. So, what are you going to do about our marriage? I asked, my voice trembling. I'm going to get a divorce, Keith replied, his decision final. Do you have any idea how much money I've spent on you? Robert's anger escalated, his frustration palpable. Hey, please stop, I interjected, trying to ease the tension. What, you're siding with him now? Robert snapped back, his anger directed towards me. It's not about taking sides. We've never heard his true feelings before. He's always followed our advice and done what was expected, even since his college days, I explained, hoping to bring some perspective. And what about my business? I won't accept it unless he marries someone suitable, Robert continued, his fury unabated. I'm sorry, Keith's voice trembled with pain. Just saying sorry won't fix this, Robert retorted harshly. But isn't it enough that he's finally being honest with us? Susan interjected gently, her voice soothing the heated atmosphere. I'm filing for divorce, so what about taking over my company? What's your decision? Robert demanded, his expression stern and unwavering. I can't take it over anymore, Keith replied quietly, his resolve clear despite the turmoil. I see, so are you prepared to take full responsibility? Robert asked, seeking a final confirmation. It might be tough, but I'll manage, Keith replied with a hint of uncertainty. Then do as you please. I won't interfere. From today, you're no longer part of this family. Remember that, Robert declared firmly, his disappointment evident as he left the dining table and exited the room. I'm truly sorry, Keith turned to me with regret in his eyes, pleading for forgiveness. But despite his apology, I couldn't forgive him for the turmoil he had caused in my life. I was resolute about getting a divorce and securing child support to move forward. I contacted the attorney I had spoken with earlier that day, and the process of divorcing Keith began the following day. A few months have passed since then, and I feel like my life has improved, even though it's not as comfortable as before. Despite the challenges, I'm in a better place now. Mom, I'm off to school, Naomi called out. Take care, honey, I replied. Naomi is now in second grade, and I'm navigating life as a single mom. I had to return to work, but it's a far cry from living with Keith, who never truly loved me. After seeing Naomi off to school, I head to work. Interestingly, the company I work for is managed by my father-in-law. We've reconciled, and they've been incredibly supportive, helping me in various ways at work. It turned out that much of what Keith had claimed was untrue, and his parents have apologized for his behavior. Thanks to their support, I was able to join this company. However, after our divorce was finalized, Keith moved in with the person he had an affair with and never returned. He's been consistent with child support payments, given his financial stability. Through hearsay, I've heard he's been wandering the streets late at night, looking worn and troubled. I'm unsure about his current relationship with the person he cheated with, but it no longer concerns me. My focus now is on providing for Naomi and building a stable future for us. Letting go of the past, I've taken the first steps toward a new life. My name is Mia Yates. I'm 23 years old, and I work from home. I have a nice older brother who is 5 years older than me. He's engaged to a woman named Natalie, who is 26 years old. Natalie is very different from me. I'm not great at talking to people, but Natalie is outgoing and makes friends easily. Natalie has become close to our parents and often visits our house without telling us beforehand. Today, she showed up at our door without calling first. When the doorbell rang, my mom knew it was Natalie and welcomed her in. Natalie came into the living room with my mom and said, "I'm here." Then she looked surprised when she saw me. "Mia, you're still home?" she said without even saying hello. I told her, "I'm working from home." But she just said, "That's enough. You need to get a real job." I didn't know how to respond, so I went back to work without saying anything. My room is special to me. It's soundproof, and I designed it myself, with my parents' permission, of course. I paid for everything. It's like my own private castle, so I keep it locked and don't let anyone else inside. To get in, you have to unlock the soundproof door and then open another door. When I got inside, I let out my frustrations by yelling. I was annoyed that Natalie didn't understand that I was working. At lunchtime, a little light bulb in my room blinked, letting me know it was time to eat. I went to the living room where lunch was ready. My mom suggested we eat together, so I sat down. But then I saw Natalie sitting across from me, looking upset. "You're eating even though you don't have a job. Don't you care about upsetting your parents? You're like a parasite," Natalie said. I stayed quiet and just listened. When my parents said grace, I did too, and then started eating. Natalie didn't seem happy that my parents didn't scold me for not having a job. Natalie, don't worry about it. Mia's our daughter, and we'll take care of her, my dad said, trying to reassure her. But Natalie wasn't convinced. She kept on expressing her worries. I can't feel sure about marrying into this family if things stay like this, she said, still angry. My parents tried to calm her down, saying just marry into our family, everything will be fine. But Natalie wasn't happy with their response. She kept on talking about her concerns. I'm still not reassured. What if you two can't take care of Mia anymore? Do you expect me or our future kids to look after her? She said, assuming that I'd always depend on others and never do anything for myself. I stopped eating and felt upset by what she was saying. My mom tried to defend me, saying, Mia does work, you know. Don't worry about her, but Natalie wouldn't stop worrying. At 23, just look at her. Braided hair, thick glasses, always in sweats. Who would believe she's working like this? Natalie said, clearly frustrated. I tried to defend myself, softly saying, how I look doesn't affect my work. But it seemed to make her even more upset. Then what kind of job do you do? Tell me, she demanded, staring at me angrily. I was so scared that I couldn't speak. My mom stepped in, saying, Mia's job is private to our family. I'm sorry, but we can't discuss it. Natalie got up and stormed off, saying, so I'm not part of this family, is that it? I felt bad for causing a scene and apologized to my parents. My dad reassured me, saying, it's okay, Mia. Just do what makes you happy, with a smile. After dinner, I felt a bit better and decided to talk to Natalie about my job after my brother's wedding. I brought it up during the meal, and my parents seemed to think it was a good idea. Later in the evening, after cleaning up, I went grocery shopping with my mom while my dad took care of the garden. When we got back, we found Natalie crying in the living room with my dad comforting her. My mom asked what was wrong, but Natalie was too upset to answer. My dad told us he heard a loud noise from inside the house while he was in the garden. He pointed to a crowbar and hammer on the table. I realized right away that something had happened to my room and rushed to check it out. When I got to my room, I saw that the door was badly damaged, like someone had tried to force it open with a crowbar and hammer. I felt frozen, a mix of shock and fear taking over me. My dad called my brother, who promised to come over as soon as he could. So I decided to stay in my room until he got there and tried to calm myself down. While I was waiting, I called my company and got permission to tell my future sister-in-law about my job after she married my brother. When I saw the light flicker in my room, I knew my brother had arrived. When I stepped out, I was surprised to see him already at the door. He apologized for startling me and didn't look at me but at the damaged door. I could tell he was probably shocked by what Natalie had done. I told him not to worry, that I would replace it myself, but he insisted that Natalie would take care of it. He took my hand and led me to the living room, where Natalie and my parents were waiting. As soon as we walked in, my brother confronted Natalie, saying, I never thought you were capable of such violence. Everyone was shocked to see my usually calm brother so angry. He insisted, you need to apologize properly to Mia and fix the door. Natalie started crying and kept saying, I'm sorry to my brother, but he interrupted her, saying, this apology isn't for me, and gave her a stern look. I told my brother it was okay, but he kept his eyes on Natalie. She turned to me, knelt down, and apologized, promising to make things right. I accepted her apology and decided to move on from the incident. But I was curious why she did it, so I asked her. She said, I thought if you didn't have a safe place, you'd have to get a job. Hearing this, I debated whether to tell her about my job before the wedding. But I knew it went against company rules, so I stayed quiet for now. The tension between my brother and Natalie bothered me, so I gave them each a concert ticket to try to lighten the mood. As Natalie looked at the tickets, she exclaimed, these are for the Ames concert. Her face lit up with excitement, and she turned to my brother, saying, let's go. Her joy was infectious. My brother asked me, are you sure? These tickets are hard to get. I replied, I got lucky. You can use them to make peace if you want. My brother's face also lit up with delight. Seeing them so happy made me happy too. The good vibes returned, and everyone forgot about the damaged door, enjoying their meal together. On the day of the concert, while I was out, Natalie excitedly visited my house to thank me. Since I wasn't home at the time, Natalie seemed to tell my parents, enjoy yourselves. Looks like Mia's decided to work outside for a change. The concert was fantastic. Afterward, my brother called me. He'd split off from Natalie at a company party and was thrilled about the concert. He mentioned that Natalie was a huge Ames fan and had always wanted to attend their once-a-year concert. He said she was over the moon about finally seeing them live. On the way home, Natalie couldn't stop talking about how amazing Ames was. When I mentioned I was glad we patched things up, my brother surprised me by saying, "The soundproof door we got as compensation cost $7,000. I just replied, "Sounds about right." He was shocked, saying, "Wow, that's expensive." I explained to my brother that the components for a soundproof room are expensive, which surprised him even more. He mentioned that Natalie felt the $7,000 expense for the door, but the concert made up for it. I felt good about giving them the tickets, especially since my brother and Natalie seemed to be getting along. However, Natalie still didn't understand my work-from-home job and thought I started working outside after the concert, which made her happy. When she realized her mistake, she started calling and visiting my house daily, urging me to get a job. I hoped to endure it until the wedding. But things only got worse. Even though I didn't want to see her until then, Natalie kept summoning me to the living room, where she kept nagging me about getting a job before the wedding, saying, "I don't want a jobless family member." To distract Natalie, I gave her merchandise like mascots and file cases from my previous company. At first, she happily accepted her favorite Ames items, but eventually, she started asking questions. She wondered why I had so much Ames merchandise. Reluctantly, I told her, "A friend who works with the Ames company gives them to me." When Natalie heard this, her smile widened and she seemed even happier. "Please get me more tickets next time," she said, but there was still a problem. She wanted more merchandise and started causing trouble about being allowed into my room. I managed to stop her a few times, but I worried she might break the door again. So I gathered my courage and gave her a stern warning. "Natalie, if you break the door again, it won't just be the cost of repairs this time. Last time, I paid for it. Next time, you'll be the one paying." Natalie's face went pale at my words. I wondered if she was really considering doing it again. All I could do was hope the wedding would be over soon so I could have some peace. Even after that, until the wedding day, there wasn't a single day when Natalie didn't visit or use the call light. I lost count of how many times I yelled enough already in my room. I tried talking to my brother about it, but he seemed resigned, saying, "I've told Natalie over 100 times that Mia is working, but she doesn't seem to listen to me." In my mind, I thought, I wish my brother would get as angry as he did when she broke my door. But I knew he was busy with wedding preparations. He had mentioned he needed to finish a ton of work before the wedding so he could go on the honeymoon. So I didn't have much hope in relying on him. I had to give up and deal with Natalie on my own. Finally, it was the day before the wedding. As expected, our parents spent the day together, so the four of us had a fun night reminiscing and looking at old photo albums. It was nice to spend time together as a family after a long time. I mentioned, "When I get married, my brother will have his own family, so we'll just be the three of us with our parents the day before the wedding. It'll feel a bit lonely." But my brother reassured me, saying, "No, I'll come here and spend the day with you." I was glad he said that. In that peaceful moment, his phone rang. It was Natalie calling. He answered and then handed me the phone, saying, "Natalie wants to talk to you." When I answered the phone, Natalie said, "Hey, something's going on with Ames. There's a big announcement tomorrow. Can you ask your friend who gives you the merchandise what it's about? What if she's quitting or taking a break?" Apparently, Ames Agency had announced on social media that there would be a major announcement the next day. I didn't want to be bothered during my family time, so I simply said, "I don't know," and hung up. My brother felt the same way and turned off his phone. When our dad said it was time to go to bed early, my brother bowed deeply and thanked our parents for taking care of him. He said he was ready to be happy with Natalie. Mom joked, "That's what happens when women get married." My brother laughed along with the rest of us, and we ended the night before the wedding on a light note. Finally, the wedding day arrived. I told my family I'd be a bit late in the morning, and they headed to the venue without me. When I got there later, I went to the waiting room to congratulate Natalie. I knocked on the door, and there she was, the beautiful bride, all ready for her big day. Just when I was going to congratulate the bride, she suddenly changed into a scary monster. She said she still had something important to tell me from yesterday when we talked on the phone. I said sorry and asked her what was wrong. She told me to leave. I tried to explain that it was my brother's wedding, but she was mad because I didn't have a job, and she didn't want people to think I was part of the family. I wanted to argue, but then Natalie, the bride, came really close to me and said firmly, "If I tell you to leave, you leave." Then she slammed the door shut. I felt really sad and went to a room they set up for me. There, professionals did my makeup and hair, and I changed into the nice dress I bought for the wedding. But I knew I wouldn't be able to go. While I was getting ready, my parents called. I told them what happened and promised I would still celebrate in my own way, even though I couldn't go to the ceremony. The wedding started without me, but I watched it on a screen in the room. I almost cried when I saw my brother looking for me, but I reminded myself it was a happy day, not a sad one, and watched the ceremony, sending my blessings silently. After all the fun, the lady hosting the event said, "We got a special video for the stars of today's show. Watch the screen, please." The lights dimmed and a video started playing. Everyone in the room cheered when they saw Ames, who Natalie adored, appear on the screen with a message. "Surprise, it's me, Ames. Congratulations on getting married, bro and Natalie." Natalie looked shocked and glanced at my brother, who seemed to be saying, "That's Mia. I've been looking forward to this day, but I couldn't make it because of some urgent stuff." I made up an excuse for not being there and shared a simple message of congratulations. Then, I admitted, "Natalie, I never told you, but I'm now part of your family. But I'm moving overseas soon, so we probably won't see each other much. You can ignore me if you want." Oh, and I wasn't just lazing around. I was working in my home studio. I couldn't help but add a little sarcasm. But I ended by saying, "I really wish you both all the happiness. I'm a singer-songwriter named Ames, and I got popular on social media. My stage name, Ames, is just my real name, Maya, spelled backward." When the lights turned on again, everyone was staring at Natalie. She looked shocked and really surprised. My part was done, so I left the place with the hair and makeup people and other workers. Later, my brother called me. He said after we left, Natalie was supposed to thank the guests and say goodbye, but instead, she was running around looking for me. When she found out I had left, she started crying in front of everyone. I also heard from friends that now everyone knows Natalie as the bride who Ames doesn't even consider family. My speech from the wedding got super famous on social media. They say she's feeling really sorry about what she did and can't even go out in her neighborhood anymore. I found out I have a serious sickness called leukemia, and the doctors say I need to stay in the hospital for a long time to get better. But when I told my family, they turned their backs on me, saying I deserved it. That's when it hit me. They don't really care about me. When I said I wanted to stop being part of their lives, they were happy about it, but they haven't realized yet how much they rely on me. My name is Sally, and I'm a stay-at-home mom in my 40s. My husband Michael and I have been married for almost 50 years. We have a daughter named Mia who just started middle school. Right now, I live with Michael, Mia, and my mother-in-law. Michael's mom raised him by herself after her divorce when he was young. Maybe she spoiled him too much because he's pretty selfish. Living with my mother-in-law made me see a side of my husband I hadn't noticed before we got married. When my husband found out I was going to have a baby, he was really happy. He couldn't believe it at first, but then he thanked me and said we would face any challenges together. I promised to do my best. But that joy didn't last long. When we found out we were having a girl during a checkup, my mother-in-law said something really hurtful to me. She said, "You never cook meat, do you?" I tried to explain that I cook a balanced diet, but she wouldn't listen. She even said that maybe the reason the baby was a girl was because I didn't eat meat. I was shocked and hurt. She kept saying we only needed boys and that having a granddaughter was the worst thing. She even called me useless. I tried to tell myself that as long as the baby was healthy, it shouldn't matter if it was a boy or a girl. But as time went on, my hopes were crushed. My husband started acting distant too, maybe because he was listening to my mother-in-law. He began treating me differently, and it hurt. "Michael, do you want to go shopping for baby stuff when you're off next?" "Do I have to? It's our baby, right?" "I want us to pick things out together." "Fine, but let's stick to the basics. Babies cost a lot, and we need to save." "Then buy what you want with your own money." I had minimal income during maternity leave. I have to save for our child's future and cover clinic bills and baby expenses. I had to go along with what Michael and my mother-in-law said and only get the necessary baby stuff. I worried they wouldn't love our daughter when she arrived. But after Mia was born, Michael and my mother-in-law adored her. They loved her even more than I expected, so I stopped worrying. I planned to focus on parenting for a while. But when Mia turned 2, Michael told me to go back to work. I thought it would be okay since my mother-in-law loved Mia too. But when I returned to work, both my mother-in-law and Michael showered even more love on Mia. Michael started spoiling her, just like my mother-in-law had spoiled him. I tried to teach Mia right from wrong with love, but it seemed she didn't see it that way. Before I knew it, Mia didn't like me and preferred to be with my husband and mother-in-law. "Hey Mia, it's time for kindergarten. Let's go together." "I don't want to go with Mommy. I want Grandma." "Mia, Mommy has to work too. Let's go to kindergarten together, okay?" "I hate Mommy. I love Daddy and Grandma." "Mia, please don't say that." "No, Mommy, just go away." Mia's words were really hurting my feelings. My mental health was suffering because of it. But my husband and mother-in-law didn't try to stop her. Instead, they looked at me like I deserved it. These tough times continued for about 10 years. Even in middle school, Mia hasn't changed. She avoids me and sticks to my husband and mother-in-law. And because of that, she's become uncontrollable. She screams and breaks things when she doesn't get her way. When I try to discipline her, she yells back at me. "Mia, can we talk? Did you take money from my wallet?" "Yeah." "So what? You're my mom. You can give me money, right? Taking without asking is wrong. Please give it back." "No way. It's your fault for not getting me the Gucci wallet. I want it for my birthday. You're only in middle school. You don't need expensive things yet. I can get them when you're older." "I want it now. Why don't you understand, you old hack?" "Mia, don't talk like that. You're so annoying, Grandma. Mom is being mean to me." When I scold her, Mia turns to my mother-in-law for help. And my mother-in-law sides with her, blaming me too. "What's wrong, Mia? Did Mom upset you again?" "Listen, Grandma, she won't get me the Gucci wallet for my birthday, and she won't give me money either. Can you believe it? That's not fair. Your mom is being stingy. Grandma will get you the wallet next time, okay?" "Yay, thank you, Grandma." "You're welcome." "I love you, Grandma." Mia happily hugged my mother-in-law. Branded stuff is too much for her age, I thought. I disagreed with my mother-in-law. "Wait, Mom, Mia is still in middle school. Shouldn't we hold off on buying her expensive things?" I suggested. "But maybe not yet. You're so stingy. I feel sorry for Mia having you as her mom," my mother-in-law snapped back. Every day, my mother-in-law spoiled Mia, buying her whatever she wanted. My husband did the same, filling our house with expensive stuff Mia barely used. Besides Mia's issues, there was another problem in our house. My mother-in-law's spending. I noticed she kept buying strange rings and bracelets. When I asked, she said a friend recommended them, but I suspected it was an MLM scheme. I wondered where she got the money since she was always buying things for Mia. Turns out, she was borrowing from banks. When I confronted her, she brushed it off, saying it wasn't my concern. I grew to hate dealing with family problems, so I threw myself into work, often working late. My husband and mother-in-law criticized me, but I didn't care. I just didn't want to be home. Then one day, I collapsed at work. Tests revealed I had leukemia, likely brought on by stress. I needed long-term treatment, so I was hospitalized. I called my mother-in-law from the hospital. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I collapsed at work. I've been diagnosed with leukemia, and I need to stay in the hospital." "You have leukemia?" I hoped she'd be at least a little concerned about my illness. But that hope quickly faded. "It's a good thing you finally got seriously sick." I was shocked by my mother-in-law's response. "What? What are you saying?" I asked. "I've been annoyed with you every day. This serves you right," she said callously. "That's a horrible thing to say. Hold on, let me talk to Mia." I asked to speak to Mia and my mother-in-law handed her the phone. "What?" Mia's response was something I never expected. "Mom, are you sick?" she asked. "I'm sorry, Mia. I have to stay in the hospital for a while," I explained. Mia's reply crushed me even more. "I'm actually glad. It's better without you bothering us. You're always mean to me. That's why you got sick. You deserve it." "Are you serious right now?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That's incredibly cruel. Everyone would be happier if I stayed sick. "I have to tell Dad about this," I said to Mia before she hung up the phone. In that moment, I felt like giving up on my family. I had reached my breaking point. I decided I would be the one to cut ties with them. Mia was my daughter, but I endured so much pain to bring her into this world. I had hoped to raise her to be a good person, but her behavior was a combination of her innate personality and how my husband and mother-in-law raised her. Some might find it unthinkable for a parent to walk away from their child, but despite our blood connection, I couldn't forgive their behavior any longer. I called my parents and asked them to bring clothes because neither my husband, mother-in-law, nor Mia had visited me during my hospital stay. Months later, after successful treatment and full recovery, instead of returning to the house I shared with my husband, I returned to my parents' house and sought advice from a lawyer about getting a divorce. My mother-in-law and Mia agreed right away. Michael was hesitant at first, concerned about public perception, but eventually agreed under pressure from my mother-in-law and Mia. Since he cooperated, I was able to get a divorce and claim compensation. About 7 years passed. I moved out of my parents' house and lived near my workplace, healthy and energetic. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call from Michael. His voice sounded exhausted, and he quickly jumped into his problem. "Hello, Sally, can you come back?" "What? Why all of a sudden? Things are tough for me right now." "What do you mean?" "My mother, she's in a huge amount of debt." Michael had just found out about my mother-in-law's debt and reached out to me for help. The debt, which had been ignored for so long, had grown to a significant sum, and my mother-in-law could no longer keep it hidden from Michael. To my ex-husband's anxious plea, I replied calmly, "You're only noticing now. She's been in debt since I was there, from way back. It seems she got caught up in an M&M scheme. All the money she spent on spoiling Mia was borrowed from banks. I can't believe it. I had no clue. I tried to warn your mother several times, and I even tried talking to you about it. But every time, you just brushed it off. But not telling me about the debt is terrible, isn't it? If I had known earlier." "Don't say that now. After all, I was in the hospital, and none of you even visited me once, remember? I'm sorry for that. Just help me out this once." "What are you talking about?" I snapped, losing my patience. My emotions boiled over, and I found myself shouting at Michael. "Do you think you can just apologize and everything will be okay? When I was sick and needed help, you abandoned me. I regret ever marrying you." My anger subsided, replaced by a sense of release. I had finally let out everything I'd been holding in. "You should end up in debt like your mother and suffer for once. Please, calm down. I'll apologize." "Shut up. It's disgusting to start relying on your divorced ex-wife now." In the background, I could hear Mia's voice. Then she took over the phone, sounding sad. "Mom, Grandma's in trouble because of her debts. Please help us." "It's not my problem. Don't ask me for help." Mia didn't give up, despite my quiet refusal. "Dad's struggling to repay Grandma's debts. I might not be able to afford college tuition and might have to drop out. Is that okay?" "So, Mom, why are you acting like this is someone else's problem? Your own daughter is in trouble." "Daughter? Who?" Mia's words made me chuckle. Just as she faced trouble, she emphasized she was my daughter, even though she never called herself that before. "What's so funny?" Michael asked. "I was just thinking about how you suddenly claim to be my daughter when you're in trouble, after calling me names all this time. That's not fair. I'm your biological daughter who's in trouble, But I don't have a daughter." "What?" "No, Mom. I made that decision 7 years ago when I was hospitalized. I don't need a family like you anymore. We're divorced, so we're just strangers now, okay?" "Mom, please don't say that." "Stop. Don't call me Mom because I'm not your mother. You should live happily with your father and grandmother who's in debt. Don't ever contact me again. You're just a burden in my life." With that, I ended the call and blocked their numbers to ensure they couldn't reach me again. After that, I heard that my ex-husband and mother-in-law were working tirelessly to repay their debts. They sold everything they owned, but it wasn't enough. They were struggling to make ends meet and even struggled to eat properly. My daughter couldn't afford her tuition and had to drop out of college. The expensive items she had were sold to pay off debts, leaving her with nothing. It seems even she is working to repay her grandmother's debts. It's heartbreaking to see my daughter facing such hardships compared to her peers. They really are foolish and helpless. They brought this upon themselves. As for me, I've purchased an apartment close to my workplace. I intend to invite my parents and live peacefully as a family of 3. From now on, I want to cherish each day with my true family and live happily.